Chapter 25. What I saw just now was indeed a battle mark, Cyan Sparrow said after a long time. Apparently, she had just calmed down from the shock. Why don't we leave? Cyan Sparrow suggested. Lin soon shook his head with his dark eyes. Since we are already here, it would be a pity if we don't see the Nirvana fire of order. As he said, he continued to move forward. Cyan Sparrow suddenly regretted instigating Lin soon to come here. This place was obviously a place of great evil. Even a slight accident was very likely to cause a disaster. But Cyan Sparrow couldn't dissuade Lin soon. She could see that Lin soon had made up his mind. The deeper they went, the thicker the black mist was. It was quiet without any sound. With the help of Third Eye, Lin soon saw many broken tiles and some broken and blackened bones scattered on the ground. They were so rotten that they would turn into flying ash and dissipate at the slightest touch. This made Lin soon judge that in the last era, it was very likely that there were many buildings here and some creatures lived here. He couldn't find out anything else. Just like that, they traveled for an entire few tens of kilometers. All along the way, they actually didn't encounter even a trace of danger, and it seemed to be extremely peaceful. But Lin soon could still keenly feel that the suffocating atmosphere became more and more intense as they went deeper, which made his hair stand on end. Why haven't I seen the Nirvana fire of order you mentioned? Lin soon couldn't help asking. Cyan Sparrow was about to answer. Suddenly, an enormous black figure appeared in the depths of the black mist. It stood there like a towering mountain. Lin soon was shocked and stopped immediately. When he looked carefully, he was shocked to discover that the huge black shadow was actually a furnace. It was dozens of feet high, covered with mottled corrosion marks and surrounded by black mist, which made it quite mysterious. Lin soon thought for a while, gritted his teeth and walked forward immediately. When he got closer, he found that the furnace had been seriously corroded and would turn into debris and dissipate at any time. On the surface of the furnace, some vague cloud patterns could be vaguely seen, but he couldn't tell what they were exactly. At this moment, the Nirvana fire of order swept out again, emitting Taoist light that covered the huge furnace. Both Lin soon and Cyan Sparrow were stunned. After that, they came to an understanding in their hearts. This furnace is probably branded with some secrets related to the Netherhell from the last era. Sure enough, as Lin soon guessed, after a while, when the Nirvana order returned, there were 10 Yama halls in the Netherworld in its order world. Every Yen Luodian had a different style and a different plaque hung on it. They were King Qin Guang Palace, King Chu Jiang Palace, King Song Emperor Palace, King Corner Palace, King Yama Palace, King Bianqing Palace, King Taishan Palace, King Du Palace, King Equality Palace, King Chakravarti Palace. With the appearance of the 10 Yama halls, Lin soon also noticed that one of the 9 Nether Dao patterns became complete and clear in an instant. His divine sense entered it, and instantly, strands of strange and miraculous profundities of the Grand Tao surged into his heart. Yama King of 10 Directions Tao. A miraculous and unfathomable Grand Tao of the Netherworld was divided into 10 branches, and all of them were related to punishment and slaughter. For example, the Mirror of Sin Tao was a Grand Tao controlled by King Qin Guang, and it was capable of seeing through the energy of sin. When cultivated to the limit, the energy of the Grand Tao would condense into a strange diagram that was like the Book of Life and Death. For example, the Sea of Misery Tao was controlled by King Chu Jiang, and it was a Tao of punishment. When cultivated to the limit, one could condense a diagram of a sea of misery. For example, the Flame Illumination Tao was controlled by King Song Emperor, and it was a Tao of suppression and restraint. When cultivated to the limit, one could condense a diagram of a sea of misery. The other branches of the Grand Tao each had their own profundities and might. These 10 types of Grand Tao had jointly formed the 10 Yama paths. Lin soon couldn't help but exclaim with admiration in his heart when he found out about all of this. Compared to the soul restraint Tao that came from the gates of hell, The 10 Yama paths that came from the 10 Yama kings were undoubtedly even more complicated and obscure, and it possessed various strange might that was extremely shocking. This caused Lin Sun to not dare imagine exactly how extraordinary the Netherhell of the last era was. It was actually capable of controlling so many unimaginable grand Tao energies. If it wasn't for the Nirvana order possessing the miraculous effect of reconstruction and rebirth, causing the soul restraint Tao and 10 Yama paths to be reconstructed and revealed, it would probably be impossible for him to understand these profundities in his entire lifetime. Another great gain? The Green Sparrow muttered, and she seemed to be slightly jealous. After traversing the Bridge of Helplessness, traversing the gates of hell, and now encountering this cauldron, Lin soon obtained something every single time, so how could the Green Sparrow maintain her composure? In the past, the Green Sparrow had never heard of any cultivator obtaining fortuitous encounters repeatedly in the ghastly underworld like Lin soon had. However, the Green Sparrow was clearly aware that all of this was probably related to the mysterious energy of order within Lin Sun's abyssal sword cauldron. The energy of order was too unbelievable. It was capable of reconstructing the energy of order that had been annihilated in the last era, allowing it to undergo rebirth in this era and emerge once more. However, the Green Sparrow was completely unaware of exactly how much benefit Lin Sun had obtained from it, and this was precisely the reason why she felt indignant, envious, and jealous. It's not a great gain, but it's a little incredible. Lin Sun sighed with emotion. He didn't see the Nirvana fire of order, but on the contrary, he obtained the 10 directions Yama Tao of the last era, which was indeed beyond his expectation. The Green Sparrow said, "Quit while you're ahead. You'd better leave quickly." Looking at the mottled cauldron, Lin Sun said casually, "What do you think is inside this cauldron?" The Green Sparrow was stunned. Lin Sun had already leaped up into the air, came to the top of the cauldron, and looked down. Although he had restrained his strength and tried to be as careful as possible, he still emitted some fluctuations of power when he leaped up into the air. Suddenly, as if the cauldron had been disturbed, a terrifying and boundless destructive aura was suddenly released from it. Boom! In an instant, the mottled and decayed cauldron exploded, and endless dazzling black flames rose into the sky. With a bang, Lin Sun was directly shaken and flew out. His whole body was penetrated, and his hair and skin felt a kind of burning pain. He couldn't help but be shocked. With his current cultivation, he hadn't been so embarrassed for a long time. In the distance, a ray of flaming light that was like a divine chain of order shot through the heavens and the earth, and it emanated boundlessly brilliant light. The scorching torrent of destruction vaporized the black mist that covered the surroundings, and even space itself was burned red. The Nirvana fire of order! The Green Sparrow shouted. Lin Sun was also shocked. It turned out that this was the terrible fire that could easily kill a Tao ancestor. Before he could think more, the Nirvana fire of order, like a wildly dancing whip, lashed at him fiercely. Boom! The flames were monstrous. Wherever the Nirvana fire of order passed, the world seemed to be incinerated, and everything was destroyed. The terrible destructive aura made Lin Sun's face change. Whoosh! Without hesitation, he turned around and fled. Originally, Lin Sun planned to suppress some Nirvana fire of order with the power of the Abyssal Sword Cauldron, but seeing such a scene, he gave up directly. That kind of power was too terrible, as if a slight touch would instantly turn him into ashes. Oh no! Suddenly, Lin Sun's heart beat fiercely, and he subconsciously dodged to one side. In the direction of his original escape, a wisp of Nirvana fire of order suddenly gushed out, as if it had been buried there for a long time. If he hadn't dodged in time, he might have bumped into it. Lin Sun couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. This thing was too strange. He didn't dare to stay and continued to escape. But just a moment later, Lin Sun's face became ugly. It turned out that in all directions of this area filled with black mist, wisps of nirvana fire of order had already been surrounded by it. Each wisp of nirvana fire of order was different. Some were as thick as pythons and bright, illuminating the mountains and rivers. Some were as slender as sword chi, flickering and wandering, erratic, strange, and unpredictable. But no matter what, these nirvana fire of order, as if they had intelligence, turned into a huge flame circle, surrounding the area around Lin Sun. And it was constantly shrinking and approaching. It was really a hopeless situation. Between advancing and retreating, it was inevitable that he would come into direct contact with these terrible flames. "It's over," Cyan Sparrow wailed. "If you had listened to me earlier, you wouldn't have fallen into such a dangerous situation." Lin Sun had no time to pay attention to Cyan Sparrow. He took a deep breath and completely calmed down. Whoosh! Suddenly, he moved in the void and rushed towards a wisp of nirvana fire of order that was as slender as sword chi. The wisp of nirvana fire of order flashed strangely and disappeared. Lin Sun looked happy and was about to take this opportunity to escape from the encirclement. But the next moment the joy on his face froze. Because on the way ahead, there appeared hundreds of wisps of nirvana fire of order, all as slender as sword chi, bright and dazzling. In other directions, various kinds of nirvana fire of order were also rushing towards him aggressively. Wherever they passed, the world was incinerated, and the flames were monstrous. Fight! Lin Sun gritted his teeth, launched Abyssal Sword Cauldron, and rushed straight forward. Bang! When the first wisp of nirvana fire of order hit Abyssal Sword Cauldron, a terrible destructive force spread, and Lin Sun almost coughed up blood. But he had no time to care about this. He ran all his strength as if he was desperate, and finally resolved the power of the nirvana fire of order. But then, the dense nirvana fire of order in front of him rushed towards him. Bang! 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 The deafening explosion resounded through the world. Every collision sound was accompanied by the release of the terrible power of nirvana fire of order. All of a sudden, Abyssal Sword Cauldron trembled violently and buzzed. Even though Lin Sun had exhausted all his cultivation, his face was pale and he coughed up blood again and again. The most terrible thing was that the nirvana fire of order behind him had also rushed towards him. If it were any other practitioner, he would have been desperate. At this critical moment, Lin Sun suddenly let out a loud shout and exerted the forbidden passing spell. In a flash, the world seemed to be silent and stagnant. Lin Sun had already taken advantage of this moment to smash the Abyssal Sword Cauldron, and the nirvana fire of order in front of him was suddenly broken. Taking this opportunity, Lin Sun moved in the void and rushed forward. P.S. I will continue to add chapters tonight. Nothing else, I just want to add chapters. I will add chapters at about 10 p.m. Chapter 25-26. On the road to the underworld, Lin Sun fell to the ground, panting. His handsome face was ghastly pale and translucent, while a trace of blood still remained on the corner of his mouth, and his deep eyes were filled with terror and rejoicing. In order to break out of the encirclement, he used the forbidden passing twice in a row to escape from the quietus fire of order. But the price he paid was that he was seriously injured and his cultivation was on the verge of drying up. Taking a deep breath, Lin Sun took out some precious healing medicines and stuffed them into his mouth. He chewed and refined them at the same time. "Yezi Wu Kei, come and protect me," Lin Sun transmitted his voice. The road to the underworld was still not safe and full of danger. Soldiers and kings of hell could rush out at any time. Yezi and Wu Kei became vigilant after they came out. Over the years, Lin Sun had collected most of the useless sovereign weapons and left them to Yezi, Wu Kei and Spirit of the Broken Blade as food. By now, their cultivation had improved by leaps and bounds. In a one-on-one fight, each of them could pose a fatal threat to a practitioner at the 7th level of the Emperor realm. If they worked together, they could even fight against a 9th realm ancestor. It should be known that in the deity Phoenix realm, Yezi and the others had fought against a ninth realm ancestor from the White Tiger bloodline. It turns out that you've kept two spirits. The Green Sparrow was dumbfounded. Only now did it realize that Lin Sun actually had a lot of trump cards. Lin Sun did not say anything and began to meditate quietly. Since he entered the vast thousand battle domain, it was the first time that he had fallen into such a predicament. He used the forbidden passing twice in a row to save his life. This was something that was rarely seen in the past. When he thought of the scenes he had experienced before, Lin Sun still had a lingering fear in his heart. The power of the Nirvana flame of order was really too terrifying. No wonder even the ancestor of one Tao was easily killed. Its power was indeed sufficient to make any cultivator despair. In the following time, it was surprisingly calm. There was no accident. Not to mention the soldiers of hell, he did not even meet a practitioner. After a full day, Lin Sun woke up from meditation. His injuries had been completely healed, and even about 80% of his exhausted strength had been restored. It would not take long for him to completely return to his peak state. But Lin Sun did not intend to stay any longer. The longer it took, the less safe it would be. Yi and Wu Kei returned to reincarnation sword sheath and insignificant bow respectively. Lin immediately decided to move on. Inside his body, the green wood Taoist body and the scarlet fire Taoist body were respectively comprehending the Soul Reaper Tao and the 10 directions Yama Tao. In fact, with Lin Sun's current cultivation and realm, it was not difficult for him to comprehend the great way of the netherworld which belonged to the last era. Just like now, he had already comprehended the profound mysteries of the Tao of Soul Hunter to the extent of achieving a small level of mastery. However, it would still take a period of time to refine the netherworld Great Tao to the level of Emperor Realm laws. Have you obtained the Nirvana flames of order? On the way, the Green Sparrow couldn't help but ask. Lin Sun smiled. He knew Green Sparrow would be curious. Got it. He nodded. When he was escaping earlier, he used the abyssal sword cauldron to suppress more than a dozen flames of order that were as thin as sword chi. When these flames of order were about to struggle, they had already been suppressed by the orderly phoenix flames and nirvana flames of order. Instantly, they could no longer move and were trapped in the sword cauldron. Really? The Green Sparrow let out a cry of surprise and became extremely excited. This is a terrifying flame that can threaten the immortals. It can actually be suppressed and subdued? It was all too clear about the details of the Nirvana flames of order. After the destruction of the last era, the power of order collapsed and sank, turning into an immortal black flame, which was called the Nirvana flames of order. In the past years, there was once a Tao ancestor who was burned alive by this flame. As a result, the mysterious forbidden area near the Yama tablet was also regarded as a place of great danger. For countless years, no one dared to step into it. Even the Green Sparrow didn't expect that Lin Sun, who had fled in such a sorry state, not only survived, but also collected this flame. How could it not be shocked? Can I have a look? The Green Sparrow asked expectantly. Sure, but are you sure you're not afraid of being roasted? Lin Sun said. The Green Sparrow immediately rolled its eyes and extinguished this idea. Next, how long do we have to walk to reach the first immortal pass? Lin Sun asked. The Green Sparrow pondered and said, in less than a month. After that, it guided Chen Shi. I'm able to discern that you're not far from breaking through. However, I suggest that you do so after you arrive at the Pass of Eternity, because that place is undoubtedly the safest, and no one would dare to act wantonly there. Lin Sun was surprised and said, is it the same as the rules in the city of extradition? Almost. Lin Sun nodded. Not long after, on the road ahead, a king of hell led hundreds of netherworld soldiers, rushing towards Lin Sun aggressively. Lin Sun was not surprised, but this time, he secretly operated the power of the soul capture doctrine that he had just comprehended, and used it to control the abyssal sword cauldron. rumble as the abyssal sword cauldron smashed down. More than a dozen netherworld soldiers instantly exploded and turned into rolling black mist. But unlike before, as the abyssal sword cauldron surged with the power of the soul capture doctrine, almost illusory figures were extracted from the black mist and suppressed into the abyssal sword cauldron. Immediately, Lin Sun noticed that the illusory figures were actually fragmented and blurred soul power. After being washed by the power of the soul capture doctrine, the soul power condensed and turned into a crystal bead the size of a broad bean. As expected, the power of the soul capture doctrine naturally restrains these netherworld soldiers. I can easily suppress and kill them, extract their soul power, and collect them. Lin Sun's spirit was lifted. The soul capture doctrine was divided into two parts, the guiding doctrine and the soul capture doctrine. It could collect all kinds of souls, and after refining, it could be turned into pure soul power, which was extremely useful for cultivators to cultivate their soul power. After these netherworld soldiers were killed, the rolling black mist was turned into the netherworld power, which was absorbed by the abyssal sword cauldron. Although the netherworld power formed by these netherworld soldiers was far from enough to condense the 9 netherworld Tao patterns. But because he could collect soul power, Lin Sun did not intend to let these netherworld soldiers go this time. Boom! The battle broke out. Lin Sun galloped through the army of hundreds of netherworld soldiers. He was invincible all the way. Even the underworld king was killed by Lin Sun with absolute power. Just a moment later, all the enemies in the field were wiped out. Lin Sun counted and found that the soul bead the size of a broad bean had become 3 fist-sized soul beads in the abyssal sword cauldron. One of them was condensed by the soul power of the underworld king. At the same time there was also a underworld pearl. Together with the netherworld power collected, the remaining 7 netherworld Tao patterns had some subtle changes. Lin Sun could not help but be quite satisfied with such a harvest. Lin Sun didn't even dare to imagine that he could collect soul power, the power of the netherworld, and the underworld pearl. Cyan Sparrow was too tired to complain about it. She was full of envy and jealousy. In the past, Green Sparrow had never even heard of such a method of harvesting spoils of war, let alone seen it. Cyan Sparrow was sure that among all the practitioners who had entered the Sunluo underworld since ancient times, Lin Sun was the only one who had such an incredible encounter. Cyan Sparrow knew that all this had something to do with the mysterious power of order that Lin Sun controlled. There was no more fatal danger on the way, nor did he encounter the horrible killing tribulations like the quietus fire of order. Every once in a while, groups of netherworld soldiers would come out. Sometimes, Underworld King would lead a group of netherworld soldiers to fight. The scale was huge and the lineup was strong. But without exception, they were all regarded by Lin Sun as glittering fat prey and hunted down. This also made the number of soul beads he collected increase rapidly. The number of underworld pearl was also increasing. The 9 netherworld Tao patterns absorbed more and more netherworld power. Along the way, Lin Sun was very proud of his success. With a kind of expectation and high-spirited mood, he overcame all the difficulties along the way. Cyan Sparrow couldn't stand it anymore. She couldn't help thinking in her heart that these netherworld soldiers were really stupid. Didn't they know that in Lin Sun's eyes they were a group of fat pigs? Time passed day by day. All the practitioners who entered the Sunluo underworld and walked behind Lin Sun were confused no matter how far they were. All along the way, they were filled with fear and anxiety, and their minds were strained. They were deeply afraid of encountering a terrifying calamity, so they were extremely careful. But they didn't expect that they could rarely encounter the terrifying netherworld soldiers and netherworld kings. Occasionally, they could barely meet some netherworld soldiers, but most of them were not a threat at all. Therefore, although they walked cautiously along the way, they almost didn't encounter any danger or threat. What's going on? Many people were confused. Could it be that luck has taken a turn for the better, and the heavens have shown their favor to us? someone couldn't help murmuring. Or, there's already a peerlessly ruthless person ahead and killed all the Netherworld soldiers along the way? Some people guessed and doubted. It's definitely that good guy. As for Tantai Fong and the others, they had a strong premonition that all of this was definitely done by Ling Xuanzi. For a time, all of them sighed with emotion. What a good person! How many good people were there in the world who were willing to help others regardless of their gains and losses? If Lin Sun knew this, he probably wouldn't know whether to laugh or cry. More than 20 days later, the black mist that covered the nether path gradually became sparse, and the oppressive and gloomy aura dissipated a lot. Lin Sun, who was trudging all the way, finally saw a black Taoist altar that was shaped like a wheel at the end of the nether path, and obscure spatial fluctuations surged on the Taoist altar. Once you step on this Taoist altar, you'll be teleported to the first immortal pass. That place is an enormous city that has existed since ancient times, and it has been controlled by different immortal emperor clans in turn for countless years. Cyan Sparrow's voice was relaxed. So long as you enter it, you can have a good rest. I'm sending you more updates. Chapter 25-27. There were 49 immortal heavenly passes in the vast thousand battle domain. Outside the Sunluo underworld was the first immortal pass, also known as the starting city. It implied that only those who entered this place were qualified to embark on the next journey. The rules of the starting city are very simple. All killing is forbidden. Those who violate the rules only have two choices. One is death. The other is to be planted with the curse of utter despair and become a guard of the city. They will never be able to escape. Cyan Sparrow pointed out, you've already seen the power of the curse of utter despair. Your two friends' life spirits were controlled by this curse. If so, they are no different from being slaves. It's better to be killed. Lin Sun listened silently. If I'm not mistaken, the faction guarding the city gate is from the Hung clan of the Immortal Emperor clan. There's definitely a Dao ancestor guarding the city gate. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to intimidate the martial emperors that entered the city. Cyan Sparrow said casually, as for other things, you'll know when you enter the city. Lin Sun nodded and went straight to the black altar shaped like a wheel. With a wave of space fluctuation, Lin Sun's figure suddenly disappeared. The world was boundless and the mountains were layered. At this moment, Lin Sun stood in front of a majestic ancient city. Compared to the mottled city wall that was thousands of meters high, he looked extremely small. It was impossible to tell how big the city was from here, but he could clearly feel the vicissitudes of time. Lin Sun turned his head and saw the mountains covered in clouds and mist. The rolling mountains stretched as far as the eye could see. Outside the starting city is a dangerous place full of strange and unpredictable dangers. I advise you to enter the city as soon as possible. Don't wander around. Cyan Sparrow reminded Lin Sun. It had already returned to the sachet, saying that it was worried that its identity would be exposed and bring unnecessary trouble to Lin Sun. Lin Sun nodded and looked at the majestic city again. The city wall was covered with knife marks, sword holes, and mottled with ancient relics. It was difficult to hide the heavy atmosphere of time, adding a kind of desolation. Vaguely, there were cryptic restrictions circulating. This was the first heaven pass of immortality in the vast thousand battle domain. Naturally, there would be formations engraved on the walls to protect the peace of this place. Even after so many killing tribulations, this place was still imperishable. The majestic and ancient city gate was made of a rare greenish-black stone. 2 teams of guards were stationed on both sides of the gate. All of them were armed with weapons, and their figures and faces were covered in black armor. But based on the aura that suffused from their bodies, all of them were existences above the Emperor realm. His cultivation was between 3rd and 6th rank Emperor realm. Even so, it was still extremely shocking. After all, they were all great emperors. Yet today, they had become a group of guards before the Immortal Pass. According to the Cyan Sparrow, These were the people who had defied the order of the city in the past. Their life souls were imprisoned, and they could only be the guards of the city for eternity. There was only Lin Sun in front of the towering city gate, so he attracted the attention of the two teams of guards as soon as he appeared. Lin Sun remained calm and went straight forward. Identity nameplate. A tall and slender guard dressed in black armor and holding a bronze greatsword spoke with a piercingly cold, murderous aura. Lin Sun handed over the nameplate. The guard looked at it in his hand, then looked at Lin Sun and said, "Anyone who enters the city needs to pay 10,000 first-class Eternity Source crystals. If it's not enough, you can exchange it with treasures." Before he finished speaking, Lin Sun had already thrown out a storage bag. The guard checked it, then looked at Lin Sun deeply and said, "It's done." As he said, he returned the nameplate to Lin Sun. Lin Sun nodded and walked straight into the city. Remember, no fighting or killing is allowed in the city. Otherwise, no matter who you are, you will pay an unbearable price. The cold voice of the guard came out. Lin Sun did not look back, and his figure quickly disappeared into the city gate. This person must be a powerful person to be able to go through the Sunluo underworld alone. The guards near the city gate discussed in a low voice. Only the guard who checked Lin Sun's nameplate waved his hand. Immediately, a slim guard approached. "Go to Sky Tower and find Lord Wen Xiaoheng. Tell him the target has appeared." "Yes." The slim guard left in a hurry. The city was huge, and the streets were incomparably wide. Ancient trees could be seen everywhere, holding up the canopy of the trees. Rows of ancient buildings were located in the streets and alleys. There were elixir shops, weapon shops, inns, restaurants, all kinds of things. The streets were crowded with pedestrians and carriages. All kinds of shouting and hawking could be heard one after another. It was noisy and lively. Lin Sun could not help but be surprised. Although the figures he saw along the way were from different races, most of them were below the Emperor realm. Some children who were playing and chasing on the streets had just set foot on the road of cultivation. This was unbelievable. One should know that this was the boundless thousand battlefield. To reach this city, one had to go through the ancient nightmare battlefield, the undead soul region and the Sunluo underworld. There were dangers everywhere, and only a slim chance of survival. Emperor realm figures had to take great risks, but most of the creatures in this city were below the Emperor realm. How could it not be strange? Green Sparrow quickly gave the answer. In the past, when many Emperor realm figures came to the boundless thousand battlefield, they would put many of their relatives and clansmen into treasures they carried with them, intending to go to the eternal world together. But the journey was too dangerous, and these Emperor realm figures were worried that if they continued, they would most likely meet with misfortune, so they left their relatives and clansmen in the city. After countless changes over the years, the number of cultivators left in the city increased. They lived and multiplied in the city, which was why Lin Sun was seeing now. Lin Sun came to a sudden realization. This made sense. As he walked, he saw that everyone got along well and orderly, regardless of their cultivation. He did not see anyone who bullied the weak. This was quite similar to the scene in the city of extradition. Lin Sun wandered around the city alone, understanding the situation. Occasionally, he would raise his head to look at the sky. There was a mysterious screen of light that covered the entire city. Outside the screen was a boundless starry sky. The stars swayed in a circle in the sky, looking magnificent and mysterious. "Looks like I can really choose to break through here," Lin Sun said thoughtfully. Other places were too dangerous, and accidents could happen at any time. But in Origin City, there was clearly no need to worry about such problems. Before long, Lin Sun found an inn, and the waiter asked for 10 first-class Eternity Source crystals. Lin Sun could not help but be stunned. The price here was too ridiculous. The waiter also explained that those who could stay in an inn in the city were all great emperors who did not lack money. Lin Sun could not help but laugh. But he did not lack money, so he left behind a bag of first-class Eternity Source crystals and booked a room for 10 days. Lin Sun could not help but nod inwardly when he walked into the room. There were all sorts of intricate restrictive powers in the inn, so there was no need to worry about outsiders finding out. But Lin Sun still personally set up a restrictive power before lying down lazily on the bed and letting out a long, comfortable sigh. Ever since he entered the ancient nightmare battlefield, he had experienced countless killings and dangers, causing his mind to be constantly tense. It was only at this moment that he relaxed a lot. After a long while, Lin Sun suddenly said to himself, Mi Wuya and Yin Yu Ro are both in my pagoda. Under such circumstances, will Wen Xiaoheng be able to sense them? Green Sparrow said, the forbidden curse of absolute extinction is sensed through one's life spirit. The power of treasures cannot be isolated. In other words, if Wen Xiaoheng is in Origin City, he will definitely sense your presence immediately. Lin Sun made a sound of acknowledgement and said, if a noble from the eternal true world like him violates the rules of the city, will he be punished? Green Sparrow thought about it and said, generally speaking, even the great figures of the eternal true world's immortal emperor clans rarely dare to attack in the city. But at some special times, even if they attack, they will find a sufficient reason. For example? Scamming. Scamming? Lin Sun was stunned, a strange look in his eyes. Qin Ke said indifferently, if Wen Xiaoheng found some scapegoats to cause trouble for you, and you fought with the scapegoats, under such circumstances, and the scapegoats said that you started it first, and there were many people who could prove this point, who do you think you would punish if you were the city lord? Lin Sun looked pensive and said, although this method is a little despicable, it is indeed the most direct and effective method. However, the key still depends on the city lord's attitude. If the city lord acquiesces to this matter, forget scamming, he can even kill you directly and frame you with a crime. Green Sparrow's voice was filled with ridicule. It is not an exaggeration to say that if the immortal emperor clans want to deal with someone from the boundless world like you, they have many ways to do so. However, under normal circumstances, no one will do such things in the open. Lin Sun thought about it and said, in other words, if they want to deal with someone, they will choose to do it in secret and not let the news leak out? Green Sparrow said, correct. However, under normal circumstances, this kind of thing rarely happens. After all, the reason why the immortal fortress can stand until now is because of the rules that have been passed down for countless years. Not anyone can break them easily. Even the immortal emperor clans that take turns to guard this city every once in a while don't dare to break the rules set by everyone. Lin Sun smiled, his black eyes were deep as he said slowly, but in my opinion, Wen Xiaoheng won't care about these rules. Then, he slowly closed his eyes and started to doze off, looking very relaxed and satisfied. Green Sparrow thought about it and didn't comment. She knew how much Wen Xiaoheng hated Lin Sun. If he had enough confidence, he wouldn't hold back just because this was the immortal fortress. At the same time, on the highest floor of a towering building in the city. This was the Sky Tower, the tallest and most magnificent building in the Origin City. At this moment, Wen Xiaoheng was standing against the railing, wearing a long robe and carrying a sword. Looking into the distance, the huge city seemed to stretch endlessly, with cobweb-like streets, row upon row of buildings, bustling pedestrians. He could see most of the scenery. Chapter 25-28. Granny Shui stood to the side and looked at Wen Xiaoheng, who was leaning against the railing silently. She could not help but feel pity for him. After the crushing defeat, Wen Xiaoheng seemed to have changed into a different person. He had become taciturn and no one knew what he was thinking. To Granny Shui, the crushing defeat was too great a blow to Wen Xiaoheng. It had become a sore spot in his heart. If he was not eliminated, his Dao heart would definitely be affected. A guard hurried over and stood in the distance. He bowed and cupped his fists, saying respectfully, "Milady, there's news from the city gate. Ling Xuanzi has entered the city." Granny Shui suddenly turned her head, her eyes flashing like lightning. She waved her hand and said, "Leave." The guard turned and left. Granny Shui took out a jade book with obscure ripples and flipped it open. She sensed it and immediately sensed that Mi Wia and Yen Yuro's life souls were in a certain area of the city. She was delighted and full of energy. She looked at Wen Xiaoheng and said, "Young master, that vile spawn has indeed entered the city." But to Granny Shui's surprise, Wen Xiaoheng did not seem to have any reaction. His expression was calm and indifferent as he looked into the distance. "Young master?" she could not help but ask. "I understand." When Xiaoheng finally spoke, he turned to look at Granny Shui, his eyes filled with bone-chilling hatred and coldness. "I've already contacted the hidden space world. They will send an assassin to deal with that child. This is the hidden space token." As he spoke, he casually threw out a token. It was the size of a palm and as red as blood. A devilish silver vertical pupil appeared on the surface of the token. Granny Shui said in shock, "Young master, you agreed to the hidden space world's conditions?" When Xiaoheng said with an expressionless face, "You know as well that ordinary Ninth Realm ancestors aren't a match for Ling Xuanzi at all, and if you want to kill him in Origin City without anyone noticing, only an assassin from the hidden void world can do it. But the price is too great. That's 3 million first-class Eternal Void Source crystals." Granny Shui could not calm down and her emotions were in turmoil. 3 million first-class Eternal Void Source crystals. Even in the eternal true world, it was a fortune that could move even a Dao ancestor. But now Granny Shui felt that it wasn't worth it to pay such a price just to kill Ling Xuanzi. "As long as I can kill Ling Xuanzi, this price is worth it." When Xiaoheng spoke word by word, and his eyes were filled with coldness. "That old fellow, Heng Tianxuo, has already agreed to close one eye on this matter. Let me see if Ling Xuanzi can walk out of Origin City alive." Heaven-traversing peak. The immortal emperor ancestor was a great figure of the Heng family, a true ancestor of the Tao. He represented the Heng family and oversaw Origin City, holding the power of the city lord. Granny Shui took a deep breath. She knew that she could not persuade him any further, so she nodded in agreement. She probed the space concealment token with her divine sense, and immediately, the information of an assassin appeared. Crane. He was ranked 6th among the Emperor-rank assassins of the hidden space realm. Since the start of the mission, he had not failed once. In the past 1,000 years, he had carried out 18 ninth-level Emperor-ranked missions and killed 18 ninth-level ancestors. The following content was a detailed list of Crane's achievements, all of which were dazzling, causing Granny Snow to be shocked. 6th Emperor rank. No wonder the fee is so high. Granny Snow sighed in her heart. Hidden Void World was a mysterious force of assassins in the eternal true world, and even some of the immortal emperors were wary of them. City Lord's Mansion. In a simple and quiet courtyard, Heng Tianxuo was holding a bone-patterned jade slip and studying it. He was dressed in a plain robe, and his face was as smooth as jade. Only his temples were white, adding an air of age to him. He sat there casually, exuding an elegant and tranquil air. From his appearance alone, it was difficult to tell that he was an old progenitor who had lived for tens of thousands of years. He was a true ancestor of the Tao. The trial secret realm will open in 3 months. I wonder how many emperors will survive this time. After a while, Heng Tianxuo spoke softly, as if he was deep in thought. Shuffling footsteps came from afar, and Heng Tianxuo immediately gathered his thoughts and asked, "Why have you come?" "My lord, we just received news that the target Wen Xiaoheng has targeted has entered the city," a boy with delicate features said softly. "That Ling Xuanzi?" Heng Tianxuo asked. "Yes." Heng Tianxuo smiled and waved his hand. "Go. Don't bother with this. If you cause any trouble, remember to suppress it. Don't disturb the order in the city." "Yes." The boy took the order and left. To be able to force Wen Xiaoheng, one of the 5 ultimate emperors of the One family, into such a mess, and even have to rely on the assassins of the Void World, this Ling Xuanzi is not an ordinary ruthless character. Heng Tianxua thought for a while and shook his head. Forget it. Since he has a grudge with the One family, let Wen Xiaoheng solve this matter. He no longer paid attention to this matter, and continued to play with the bone-patterned jade slip in his hand, thinking about the trial's secret realm. The night was as dark as ink. Lin Sun walked out of the inn and walked towards the brightly lit and bustling street with his hands behind his back. Buying Starfrost 9 stamen flowers, as many as you can. Hot golden scale meat buns, fresh and juicy, thin skin can be called the best. Customer, do you want to buy some divine materials? These are all unique treasures in the boundless 1,000 battlefields, and it's difficult to find them in the outside world. All kinds of shouts and hawking sounded one after another. Lin Sun strolled along the way, and it was an eye-opener. Different from other places, the treasures sold in the city of origin were of all kinds, and they were all rare treasures that were rarely seen in the outside world. However, the prices were ridiculously high. Not long after, Lin Sun walked into a rather large treasure shop, and an attendant immediately came to greet him. I need to buy some underworld pearls, said Lin Sun. The attendant was startled and said, Senior, these treasures are extremely rare, and it's rare to find them. Even if someone can find them, they will rarely sell them. Do you have underworld pearls here? Lin Sun asked directly. Yes. The one who answered Lin Sun was a lean man, and he smiled and cupped his hands. I'm Heng Yuntong, the manager of this shop. Surnamed Heng. Lin Sun immediately knew that this person in front of him must be a member of the Heng family of the immortal emperor family. How many underworld pearls do you need? Heng Yuntong asked with a smile. As many as you have, Lin Sun said without hesitation. Heng Yuntong raised his eyebrows and said, Do you know how much one underworld pearl is worth? As he spoke, he extended 4 fingers and said, 400,000 high-grade eternity crystals. Lin Sun was surprised. In the eternal world, it's worth only 300,000, right? Heng Yuntong laughed. This is not the eternal world, so the price of underworld pearls is naturally different. Lin Sun thought about it and said, Then how many underworld pearls do you have? 3, Heng Yuntong reported a number. After thinking about it, Lin Sun asked, Can I exchange them with other items? Heng Yuntong smiled and said, Of course. Immediately, he brought Lin Sun into a quiet room that was isolated from the outside world. 15 minutes later, when Lin Sun walked out of the quiet room, the eternity crystals on him were all gone. Even the spoils of war that he had collected along the way were almost all gone. In exchange, he had only obtained 3 underworld pearls. This treasure was simply too expensive, and it could be said to be astronomical. After all, he had sold all kinds of treasures that he did not need at the 4 Supremes' house in the Guide City to exchange for 9,000 first-grade eternity crystals. If Lin Sun had not killed along the way and obtained a large number of spoils of war, he would not even be able to afford 1 underworld pearl. In the end, Heng Yuntong sent Lin Sun, the distinguished guest, out of the door with a smile on his face. It was not until Lin Sun's figure disappeared that he retracted his gaze, and a smile appeared on his lips. This Ling Xuanzi was indeed the guy who defeated Wen Xiaoheng. When he was counting and exchanging the treasures on Lin Sun, most of the spoils of war came from the emperors around Wen Xiaoheng, and many of the treasures had the unique brand of the Wen family. It was also because of this that Heng Yuntong was able to determine Lin Sun's identity. When you die, perhaps I will go and collect your corpse. As for the treasures on you, take them as payment for collecting your corpse. Heng Yuntong's imagination ran wild. After returning to the inn, Lin Sun casually set up a restrictive power and took out the abyssal sword cauldron. Including the ones I bought today, I already have 15 underworld pearls. I just don't know if I can transform another netherworld Dao pattern. As Lin Sun pondered, He casually took out an underworld pearl and crushed it. All of a sudden, wisps of dim yellow light rain fell into the abyssal sword cauldron like nectar. The dim yellow light rain was greedily absorbed by one of the netherworld Tao patterns and refined into netherworld energy. This netherworld Tao pattern also underwent some subtle changes. Previously, according to Cyan Sparrow, the underworld pearl had an incredible effect on refining treasures, which was why its value was ridiculously high in the eternal world. After Lin Sun tested it, he realized that the power contained in the underworld pearl also had an amazing effect on refining the 9 netherworld Tao patterns. Previously, when he went to purchase the underworld pearl, he planned to accumulate more and try to refine a complete netherworld Tao in one go. Lin Sun had a feeling that the 9 netherworld Tao patterns were not as simple as just imprinting a Tao on each of them. When he completely refined the 9 complete Tao patterns, it was highly possible that they would undergo a further transformation. In the middle of the night, Lin Sun crushed the underworld pearls one after another, and the power contained in them was absorbed by the netherworld Tao patterns in the abyssal sword cauldron. The night was getting darker. Suddenly, Lin Sun's heart palpitated without any warning. The combat instinct that he had honed for many years made him dodge subconsciously. Soundlessly, a crack appeared on the ground beneath his feet, and a dull and lusterless sharp light suddenly flashed. The restrictive power that enveloped the room was easily torn apart, as if it did not exist. It turned into a rain of light and dissipated. The chair that Lin Sun had been sitting on also turned into powder and drifted away. P.S. Someone said that it was the last day of the month, so how could he not update? The goldfish thought for a while, and could not refute that. Then he would continue to update tonight. But the third update would be a little late. Chapter 25-29. A series of scenes happened in an instant. It was incredibly fast. It was also extremely mysterious and fierce. If Lin hadn't dodged in time, he would have been hit. The room returned to silence. Lin Sun was surrounded by Taoist light, and his black eyes were terrifyingly cold. This inn was a folded space layer by layer. Each room was an independent space. In addition to the restriction power set by Lin Sun, the inn was also surrounded by the power of restriction. But the assassin could attack silently. It could be imagined that the origin of the assassin was extraordinary. Whoosh! Suddenly, Lin Sun waved his sleeves. There was only a ripple in the void, and then it returned to peace silently. Lin Sun could easily burn the mountains and boil the sea with the power of waving his sleeves. But now, it seemed to be offset by some strange power. This made him frown. He quietly ran the mysterious Taoist light in his pupils and used the third eye. The scene in front of him suddenly changed. It was dark and silent. As if falling into the eternal night, he couldn't feel a trace of light at all. Interesting. I actually fell into the barrier of a secret realm without making a sound. Lin Sun looked around with a calm expression. This place isolated spiritual awareness, which meant that the perception was blocked, and the scene in front of him was very likely to be unreal. False and real, it was mysterious and unpredictable. The most frightening thing was that until now, Lin Sun hadn't noticed the trace of the assassin. Quietly, a ray of sharp light appeared and blended into the darkness. Its breath was restrained to the extreme, without a trace of power fluctuation. It suddenly stabbed at Lin Sun. Lin Sun bent his body, and the strange and silent light passed by his cheek and then disappeared silently. This dangerous scene was enough to make any Emperor Realm expert change his expression. From beginning to end, Lin Sun's expression didn't change, and he didn't even blink his eyes. He was as calm as water. And at the same time, with a clang, the abyssal sword cauldron suddenly shone brightly, and a Taoist sword swept out and pierced the void in front of him. The place that was originally dark and empty suddenly had a roar, and was shaken by the Taoist sword. Then, a figure suddenly flashed out. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Lin Sun rushed forward and struck out with his palm. Rumble! The dark world produced a violent roar, and the void was like a turbulent sea. But the black figure was nowhere to be seen. Lin Sun couldn't help but raise his eyebrows and said, "It seems that you're not an ordinary person to be able to master such assassination skills." No one responded. Lin Sun's dark eyes were deep, and he stood still. He also seemed very calm and didn't panic at all. This was like a hidden battle, one in the light and the other in the dark. Both sides were searching for a flaw that would allow them to kill in a single strike, and it was very likely that the slightest bit of carelessness would determine life and death. It was the first time for Lin Sun to encounter such a strange and unpredictable assassination. However, he wasn't nervous at all. Since he'd started cultivating until now, he'd experienced countless battles of life and death, and he'd tempered an extremely terrifying combat instinct a long time ago. Even if his divine sense was obstructed and his perception was no longer there, just by relying on his combat instincts, he was not afraid of fighting this hidden assassin. Suddenly, Lin Sun's figure flashed. In the darkness beneath his feet, a sharp light suddenly appeared, and it vanished in a flash. It was mysterious and soundless. If it was any other Emperor Realm expert, they would have been killed countless times already. But Lin Sun seemed to be able to predict the future. Every time, he narrowly avoided it one step ahead of time, which was also incredible. And in the following time, this kind of strange assassination and attack continued to happen. Every time, it seemed to appear out of thin air, unpredictable and impossible to guard against. The power of this kind of assassination was also terrible. Once, Lin Sun struck horizontally with the Abyssal Taoist sword. When it collided with the sharp light, the power generated was extremely amazing. This also made Lin Sun judge that the strength of this assassin was comparable to the level of Ninth Realm ancestors. However, what was more terrible than the Ninth Realm ancestors was the assassination skills mastered by this assassin, which was the most threatening. Unfortunately, Lin Sun was already familiar with this kind of secret battle, and he dodged more and more easily and calmly. Soon, the dark world fell into silence. The attack from the assassin didn't appear again. But Lin Sun frowned and had a hunch that the guy might have noticed that it was difficult to threaten him with this kind of surprise attack. But this guy didn't leave, obviously intending to use new means. Just as he thought of this, boom! An incomparably dazzling light suddenly appeared, and the dark world suddenly became a vast expanse of whiteness. The dazzling light was even brighter than the sun. Once people were used to the darkness, when a light suddenly appeared, they would feel extremely uncomfortable and even panic. What's more, the light that suddenly appeared at this moment was full of horrible killing intent. It was like a landslide, a tsunami, and the explosion of the sun. The light was as sharp as the light, all-pervasive. Bang, bang, bang! A series of dense and terrible collisions sounded. The bright light and shadow, like a torrent of sharp light pouring down, attacked Lin Sun from all directions. The abyssal sword cauldron buzzed and burst out sparks. In just a moment, Lin Sun suffered thousands of attacks, like a small boat in the raging sea. That scene was simply despairing. But at this moment, Lin Sun let out a long laugh. "Caught you!" After that, boom! His figure suddenly stretched out, like a big abyss waking up from silence, releasing a terrible power that could swallow the sky and the earth. The dazzling and sharp auras that came from all directions were completely crushed and devoured. At the same time, the abyssal sword cauldron had already rushed out and struck fiercely in the distance. Clang! In the earth-shaking collision, the abyssal sword cauldron was blocked by a long and slender black sword. The force between the two collided and spread, disturbing the world. Then, a thin figure staggered out of nothingness. Dressed in a straw raincoat and a bamboo hat, the whole person was like a shadow, giving people a feeling of illusion. Puff! As soon as he appeared, he coughed up a mouthful of blood. Obviously, he was directly injured by this blow. "Go!" With a hoarse and low voice, he suddenly turned the black sword in his hand. Suddenly, a strange and dense Taoist pattern appeared on the black sword, burning fiercely and bursting out a terrible power, which dissolved the suppression of the abyssal sword cauldron. Whoosh! His figure flickered, and he was about to dive into the darkness of nothingness again. At this time, an ancient Taoist sword whistled out of the abyssal sword cauldron and chopped down with the power of splitting the sky and the earth. The sword edge was like the heaven-cutting blade. Crack! The thin figure tried his best to resist, but the black sword in his hand was directly cut into 2 pieces and splashed out. Damn it! The thin figure seemed to finally feel fear, but it was too late for him to dodge. The whole figure was instantly submerged by the vast sword intent. Boom! As if the heavens were falling and the earth was cracking, the black figure was directly crushed and dissipated in the boundless sword chi. After a while, everything calmed down. Lin Sun went forward, but found that in addition to the black sword that had been cut into 2 pieces, there was only a scorched crane feather left in the field. Holding the crane feather in his hand and looking at it for a moment, Lin Sun couldn't help frowning. Didn't he die? The darkness nearby fell and dissipated like peeling off a wall. After a burst of strange distorted space ripples, Lin Sun's figure reappeared in his room. Only the broken wooden chair, the cracked ground, and the dissipating power of the prohibition proved that the mysterious assassination just happened was true. Lin Sun frowned and stared at the cracked ground for a moment. Then he flashed into it. Under the crack there was a deep and winding path. As soon as Lin Sun's figure fell, he immediately felt a wave of residual power. It seems that this guy didn't die completely, but he was seriously injured. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to leave his breath here with his hiding means. Lin Sun's dark eyes were deep, and he immediately followed the residual breath. Just for a moment, Lin Sun had come to the end of the underground path, where there was a gap leading to the surface. After rushing out, Lin Sun found that this was an inconspicuous courtyard, overgrown with weeds, which was obviously abandoned for a long time. Here, he could no longer catch the breath of the assassin. Someone should have met him here and taken him away as soon as he was injured. Lin Sun stood there, with his dark eyes terrifyingly cold. After a while, he returned to the inn along the original path. A crane feather. Is the assassin a crane-shaped divine bird? Lin Sun took out the crane feather again and sensed the breath imprinted in it with his divine awareness. Gloomy, cold, dark, sharp, cryptic. After a while, Lin Sun rubbed his fingertips, and the crane feather turned into ashes and scattered. After that, he took out the black sword that had been sliced into 2 and observed it carefully. He noticed that the sword was narrow, slender, and over a meter long. The edges on both sides of the sword were dim and lusterless, and the body of the sword was covered in dense and strange twisted Tao marking diagrams. "I know, this man is he," suddenly, Cyan Sparrow said with surprise. "I didn't expect that when Xiaoheng was so cruel that he didn't hesitate to ask the top assassin of the Hidden Void World to deal with you." Lin Sun raised his eyebrows. Hidden Void World? In the Eternal World, there are 2 mysterious assassin forces. One is the Hidden Void World, the other is the Cloud and Water World. The former is in charge of assassination, and the latter is in charge of killing. They are both mysterious forces that are immortal. Tracing back to their history, they are even older than some immortal emperor clans. Cyan Sparrow's voice was low, and she was a little absent-minded. No one knew the origin of these 2 mysterious forces, but they were definitely not ordinary assassin organizations, because the people they dealt with were above the Emperor realm. In the Eternal World, the mention of the Hidden Void World and the Water World was a terrible deterrent, and it made people dread and fear. After a while, Cyan Sparrow said, "If my guess is correct, the person who tried to assassinate you is he from the Hidden Void World, a mysterious person who is ranked 6th among the Emperor Realm assassins in the Hidden Void World. In the past, countless Emperor Realm figures have been killed by him, and there are some extremely powerful 9th Realm ancestors among them. P.S. Tomorrow is the first day of the month, and I want to ask for a guaranteed monthly ticket in advance. Chapter 25:30. When he heard this, Lin Sun could not help but frown. Hidden Space World and Cloud Water were two forces of assassins who were famous in the Eternal World for their assassinations and killings. Their foundation could be traced back to ancient times, and they had assassinated countless emperors, who would not be wary of such a mysterious force. Moreover, according to Cyan Sparrow, the people in these two forces had been immersed in killing ever since they stepped onto the path of cultivation. They were perverts who had grown up in mountains of corpses and seas of blood. Their assassination skills were unparalleled in the world. If they wanted to assassinate someone, it would be the same as giving that person a death sentence. A long time ago, because Cloud Water had repeatedly assassinated the important figures of the immortal emperor clans, they had incurred the wrath of the masses. Thus, a group of immortal emperor clans had attacked Cloud Water. It was an extremely bloody battle that lasted for many years. The assassins from Cloud Water had appeared and disappeared mysteriously, as if they were everywhere. They had carried out the most intense counterattack. That period of time could be said to have been dark and turbulent. No one knew how many powerful figures had died. In the end, after that battle, Cloud Water had been eradicated, but it had not been wiped out. It was said that some of its remaining forces had gone into hiding. But after that, there was rarely any news about Cloud Water. Many people had long since forgotten that dark and bloody period of time. Hidden Space World might be as famous as Cloud Water, but over the years, they rarely provoked the immortal emperor clans. Thus, they did not cause any anger. But there was no doubt that the foundation of the Hidden Space World was not weaker than that of Cloud Water. Even the immortal emperor clans would not easily provoke them. When Xiaoheng must have paid a great price to be able to get he to help. I have to say, even I am surprised that you managed to escape with your life. As Cyan Sparrow spoke, she looked at Lin Sun with a strange gaze. His existence was also famous in the Eternal World. How could anyone overlook an assassin who was ranked 6th in the Eternal World? But tonight, he had almost died at Lin Sun's hands. Surprised? He's just an assassin. His greatest strength is breath control and stealth. When I saw through all of this, he was only slightly stronger than a Realm 9 ancestor, Lin Sun said casually. Lin Sun said casually, but I can't let this matter go. Even if he works for money, even if he comes from the hidden void world, since he dares to assassinate me, he must pay the price. He spoke casually, but the meaning within his words caused Qin Ke to raise her eyebrows, and then she laughed with ridicule. Once you truly understand how terrifying the hidden space dimension is, perhaps you won't dare to speak such words. Lin Sun smiled and didn't bother to explain. But after experiencing this, Lin Sun became cautious. Crane's appearance proved that even in the undying Heaven Pass, it was impossible to be absolutely safe. He returned with his tail between his legs. I'm afraid when Xiaoheng will not let this matter rest. Are you planning to let it go just like that? Qin Ke asked. Of course not. Lin Sun said without hesitation. It's impolite not to reciprocate. Even if we can't catch the assassin, we should at least make Wen Xiaoheng pay for it. Then, a cold light flashed in his eyes. Since the other party dared to attack unscrupulously in the city, Lin Sun would not be subject to the rules of the city and swallow his anger. What do you plan to do? Green Sparrow asked excitedly. Wait for an opportunity. As Lin Sun said, he took out the abyssal sword cauldron again, and continued to refine the 9 netherworld Tao patterns with the underworld pearl. It seemed that what happened just now didn't affect his state of mind at all. Green Sparrow couldn't help sighing inwardly. Lin Sun's state of mind was too strong and tenacious. If it were someone else who encountered such a sudden change, he would have been filled with anger and worry. But he actually had the leisure to refine weapons. This night was destined to not be peaceful. Tianyu Tower. When Xiaoheng stood leaning against the railing, holding a jade porcelain wine pot, looking very leisurely and comfortable. He liked the feeling of looking down at the world, having a panoramic view of the world, and seeing the appearance of all living beings, which made people involuntarily feel like a king descending to the world. Suddenly, there was a ripple in the void, and Granny Snow's figure emerged, her face extremely pale. "Young master," he failed. Crack! The jade porcelain wine pot in Wen Xiaoheng's hand fell to the ground, splashing debris. He was stunned for a moment, as if he had misheard, and couldn't help asking, "Failed?" Granny Snow's face was ashen, and she said in a low voice, "I just received news that he was seriously injured, and was almost killed." When Xiaoheng only felt his vision turning black, and his body swayed. His handsome face suddenly became ferocious, and his veins popped out, his chest heaving up and down with anger. "My 3,000,000 eternal void source crystals went down the drain just like that? What the F***ck hidden void world can't even kill Ling Xuanzi, what a piece of trash!" He clearly lost control of his emotions, and flew into a rage, as if he was venting his anger. "Young master, there's no doubt that he is powerful. The reason why we lost is probably because we still underestimated Ling Xuanzi." Granny Snow's expression was uncertain, and she said, "However, the contact person from the Hidden Void world has already said that since he has accepted our mission, he will naturally give us a satisfactory explanation, but what?" When Xiaoheng asked. "They said that the previous reward was not enough, and if we want Ling Xuanzi to die, we have to pay another 2,000,000 eternal void source crystals. The reason is that the information we provided about Ling Xuanzi was inaccurate, and it caused them to make a mistake during the assassination." As she finished speaking, Granny Snow's voice became softer, and she felt like there was a ball of fire in her chest that was about to explode. However, when Xiaoheng was stunned for a moment, and he was so angry that his lungs almost exploded. He was so angry that he laughed. "What does the Hidden Void world think I am? A sucker that can be extorted at will? They've gone too far." After a long time, when Xiaoheng calmed down a little, and then he said with a gloomy face, "Tell the Hidden Void world that I won't give them a single 2,000,000 eternal void source crystals. They can either kill Ling Xuanzi, or they can return my 3,000,000 eternal void source crystals." As he finished speaking, he couldn't help but curse angrily. "These bastards have failed their mission, yet they're still bargaining with me. They're simply insane." Granny Snow spoke with worry. "Young master, if it's not necessary, it's better not to offend the Hidden Void world. This power has existed until now, and its resources and reserves are even more terrifying than our Wen clan. Instead of making a fuss about this with them, why don't we spend some more money and allow them to continue dealing with Ling Xuanzi?" She paused for a moment and said hesitantly, "After all, even he was unable to kill Ling Xuanzi. At the very least, it's sufficient to prove that unless we ask Heng Tianxua, the ancestor of the Tao, to personally make a move, otherwise, we're probably utterly unable to do anything to him with our strength." When Xiaoheng was stunned, and an indescribable feeling of defeat arose spontaneously in his heart. As one of the 5 ultimate emperors of the Wen clan, he hadn't experienced such a feeling for a very long time. After a long time, he took a deep breath and said, "Tell the Hidden Void world that they'll be able to obtain another 2,000,000 eternal void source crystals when they kill Ling Xuanzi." Granny Snow heaved a sigh of relief in her heart, and she received her orders and left. The assassin from the Hidden Void world lost? When he found out about this, Heng Tianxua, who was cultivating in meditation, couldn't help but be alarmed, and he felt extremely surprised. "My lord, this matter has been confirmed. Fortunately, no disturbances spread, and everything occurred and ended in secret." A boy spoke with a clear voice. Heng Tianxua grunted in acknowledgement and said, "When Xiaoheng might come later, so just ask him to come over." The boy was stunned, and then he received his orders and left. Sure enough, it wasn't long before when Xiaoheng arrived hastily, and he cupped his hands and said, "Uncle, I've disturbed you again." Heng Tianxua revealed a smile, and then he stood up and said, don't mention it. Quickly, have a seat. When Xiaoheng shook his head and said, I've only come here to seek a clear answer from Uncle. What sort of price should I pay for Uncle to personally eliminate Ling Xuanzi? Heng Tianshua's pupils narrowed, and he said after a short while, What? Can't the members of the Hidden Void World do it? The corners of Wen Xiaoheng's mouth twitched imperceptibly, and he said, With Uncle's ability, I presume you already know the outcome of this assassination. Truthfully speaking, I'm truly disappointed in the Hidden Void World. Heng Tianxua shook his head and guided, Nephew, you're wrong. I do know a little about He's Tao of assassination, and a peak 7th level Imperial Emperor like you is probably not a match for him. This doesn't prove that the Hidden Void World is useless, but Ling Xuanzi is very difficult to deal with. When Xiaoheng's heart shook, and his expression changed slightly. Heng Tianxua smiled and continued, Nephew, you should have deduced this as well, and that's why you personally came to ask me to make a move, right? When Xiaoheng's expression flickered indeterminately, and he said in a low voice after a short while, Uncle, please help me this once. Heng Tianxua thought for a moment and said, The trial's secret realm will be opening in 3 months. When Xiaoheng was stunned, and then he seemed to have understood something and said, Uncle, what do you mean? Heng Tianxua smiled warmly. What I mean is, perhaps we can make Ling Xuanzi disappear forever. When Xiaoheng's eyes shone with a divine light, and his spirits were lifted as he said, Uncle, you're saying that we should send this fellow to the trial's secret realm's 9th region? Heng Tianxua smiled and said nothing. When Xiaoheng seemed to have come to a complete understanding instead, and he said, 9th region. 9th region. Why didn't I think that as long as Uncle agrees, you'll be able to obediently let those who are participating in the trials go to their deaths? Heng Tianxua frowned and said, Nephew, this is a trial, and only those who walk out of the trial's secret realm can continue on their journey to the eternal true world. How can it be called going to their death? Of course, since it's a trial, then casualties can't be avoided. When Xiaoheng cursed in his heart for being hypocritical, yet he smiled respectfully and said, I'll have to trouble Uncle with this matter. In the future, I'll surely repay you generously. Heng Tianxua laughed heartily. What generous repayment? I don't care about all that. When you're free, ask your father to come and meet this old friend of his. When Xiaoheng was stunned and his smile was slightly forced, yet he still nodded. How could he not understand that in Heng Tianxua's eyes, when Xiaoheng's repayment was utterly unimportant? What Heng Tianxua truly wanted was repayment from his father, the current patriarch of the Wen clan. This old geezer is too cunning and greedy. When he left the city governor's estate, when Xiaoheng cursed in his heart once more. But what he could do was that he had no choice but to agree. Enmity had already been formed. He could only fight to the death. Chapter 25:31. The night passed quietly and a new day arrived. In the room of the inn, Lin Sun's eyes revealed a hint of joy. After refining all the Yellow Springs pearls in his body, one of the 9 netherworld Tao patterns was completed, and it revealed a mysterious Tao purgatory. The refining Tao was like a purgatory, suppressing all evil spirits. When this Tao was cultivated to the extreme, it could condense a pattern similar to the 18 purgatories. During a battle, using the purgatory Tao to kill the enemy was like opening the gates of hell. The suppressive force produced was terrifying. Moreover, Lin Sun noticed that if the purgatory Tao and the soul capture Tao were used together, they could form a magical effect that complemented each other. The power was also incredible. One was the soul capture Tao, the other the suppression Tao. It was shocking. But soon, Lin Sun could not be happy. 15 underworld pearls could only condense 1 purgatory Tao. If he wanted to condense the remaining 6 netherworld Tao patterns to completion, wouldn't he need to collect 90 underworld pearls? 1 underworld pearl was worth 400,000 eternal void source crystals. 90 was a total of 36 million first-class eternal void source crystals. This number made Lin Sun hold his breath and his heart twitched. For the current him, this was simply an astronomical figure that was far beyond his reach. There will be many competitions and killings on the road ahead. I have to collect some spoils of war. Lin Sun had not experienced the feeling of being unable to cook a meal without rice for a long time. This finally aroused some fighting spirit in him. Only when there was pressure would there be motivation. Not long after, Lin Sun walked out of the inn and strolled on the street with his hands behind his back. The city was very lively. Most of the people were natives, and only a small number were trial takers like Lin Sun. Even so, the number of trial takers should not be underestimated. In other words, if I want to move forward, I have to participate in this trial secret realm? Lin Sun asked casually on the way. Previously, Cyan Sparrow had already said that among the 49 immortal passes in the boundless thousand battle domain, the 36 minor immortal passes were just temporary resting places that could be entered and exited at any time. Only within the 13 great passes of immortality, if one wanted to continue forward, then one had to undergo different trials. The starting city was the first great immortal heavenly pass in the vast thousand battles domain. If he wanted to continue forward, he would have to participate in the trial mystic realm. Only by collecting 10 star sources from the trial mystic realm would he be qualified to head to the next battlefield. You can also buy 10 star sources. That way, you won't have to participate in the trial. The Green Sparrow said, however, a complete stellar source is worth around 500,000 eternal void source crystals. 10 of them would be 5 million. Can you afford it? Lin Sun was speechless. Cyan Sparrow said, not to mention you, even those nobles with solid family backgrounds can't take out so many Zhou Void origin crystals in such a short time. So, you'd better obediently go and register. Lin Sun suddenly thought of something. If I collect more stellar source, can I sell it to others? Qin Ke was dumbfounded. Has this guy gone crazy from lack of money? Lin Sun had already started to calculate how many stellar source crystals he had to sell in order to collect 36 million first-class eternal void source crystals. Wandering like this, Lin Sun came to the Castellan mansion. With the identity nameplate he obtained from the guiding city, Lin Sun successfully registered and got a place to participate in the trial. As soon as Lin Sun left, the news of his registration reached Heng Tianxua. Heng Tianxua smiled. He was not surprised. He thought to himself, it's a good deal to exchange the death of Ling Xuanzi for a favor from the patriarch of Wen clan. Until dusk fell, Lin Sun returned to the inn. When he saw the waiter who greeted him with a smile, he suddenly remembered something. He had only paid the rent for 10 days in advance, but he had to wait for 3 months before he could participate in the trial mystic realm. This meant that he would have to pay more for the rent. However, the remaining eternal void source crystals he had could not support him for 3 months. It seems that I have to go out tonight, Lin Sun thought to himself. Previously, he seemed to be strolling on the street, but in fact, he had already found out the specific place where Wen Xiaoheng stayed. He even went there personally to check it out. The night was as dark as ink. On the first floor of the inn, Lin Sun sat there casually. He ordered a pot of wine and drank by himself. Hey, nice guy. Suddenly, a surprised voice sounded from the door of the inn. Lin Sun looked up and saw Tan Tai Feng and his companions appear at the door of the inn. He couldn't help laughing. What a coincidence. Tan Tai Feng laughed heartily and waved his hand. We'll stay here. You go to get a room. I want to have a drink with Ling Xuanzi. As he said, he went to Lin Sun's table and sat down. He said generously, Waiter, take out your private collection of precious wine. Lin Sun couldn't help reminding him, the price of this place is ridiculously expensive. Tan Tai Feng was startled and couldn't help but sneer. Fellow cultivator, to put it bluntly, I, Tan Tai Feng, have never worried about money in my entire life. You can drink as much as you want, I'll take care of the drinks tonight. Obviously, he was not short of money. Lin Sun immediately laughed. Okay, let's drink to our heart's content tonight. Tan Tai Fung also laughed. On the way to the Sunluo underworld, although he didn't have any communication with Lin Sun, he had a great impression of Lin Sun, who was chivalrous and helpful. This time, they met again in the city, which made Tan Tai Fung sigh with emotion about the magic of fate. After a little communication with Lin Sun, Tan Tai Fung felt that Ling Xuanzi was simply a man of the same generation, who was not pretentious at all. Soon, jars of wine were brought up one after another. Come on, let's drink a big bowl first. Tan Tai Fung was in high spirits and drank with Lin Sun. The practitioners who followed Tan Tai Fung all the way couldn't help laughing when they saw this. Their impression of Lin Sun was full of suspicion and vigilance at the beginning. They thought that Lin Sun's helpful behavior was too hypocritical, and it was very likely that he was trying to flatter their young master. But soon, a series of actions of Lin Sun changed their impression. Even speaking of which, they could walk out of the Sunluo underworld so easily without losing any soldiers because of Lin Sun. After all, the soldiers of Hell King along the way were all wiped out by Lin Sun. Come on, let me also propose a toast to the good guy. Soon, someone came forward and proposed a toast with a smile. What good guy? This is Ling Xuanzi. Don't tease him with the words good guy. Tan Tai Fung glared and scolded. Yes, Ling Xuanzi. Those people immediately changed their words. Lin Sun didn't care about this and immediately clinked glasses with them one by one. For a time, the guests and the host were happy and harmonious. But no one knew that this was just a clone of Lin Sun. At the same time, Sky Universe Tower. Lin Sun's figure appeared quietly in the dark night. When it came to the means of stealth, Lin Sun was not weak at all. His senior brother Jing Zhongyue was superb in this way. Jing Zhongyue was ranked 20th in Fangsuan Mountain. His skin was bronze and he was strong and vigorous. He carried a quiver on his back and controlled a beast bone bow. He was the #1 divine archer of Fangsuan Mountain. Back then, in the sky chess match that killed the nameless emperor, Jing Zhongyue had once shown his traces. With his peerlessly sharp archery and mysterious movement skills, he killed many powerful enemies. Jing Zhongyue's best concealment technique was called crossing the sea by deception. Once it was used, even the emperor ancestor would find it difficult to see his figure. It was boundlessly marvelous. Among the many inheritances that Lin Sun carried, there was crossing the sea by deception. Although it hadn't reached the acme of perfection like Jing Zhongyue, it was enough. At this moment, his figure silently disappeared in the shadow of Sky Universe Tower. On the highest floor of Sky Universe Tower, when Xiaoheng sat there alone with a gloomy expression, he sneered. It seems that his defeat has embarrassed the hidden Void Realm. They actually want to send Shuang, who is ranked 4th. Beside him, Granny Snow was a little excited. She said, Shuang is a legend of the hidden Void Realm. He is a peerless emperor-level assassin. In the past years, whether it is his achievements or the difficulty of the missions, they are all far above he. Many rumors say that the current Shuang has become extremely terrifying. It is very likely that he has the ability to assassinate a Dao ancestor. If Shuang comes to deal with Ling Xuanzi, it is worth spending 5 million eternal void source crystals. After listening, when Xiaoheng sneered, the hidden Void Realm also said that it will take at least half a year for Shuang to arrive here. I can't afford to wait. However, I want to see how Shuang will feel when he arrives and sees that Ling Xuanzi has long been killed. Granny Snow was startled. Young master, has Heng Tianxue agreed to help? When Xiaoheng's lips curled up, how can that old fox personally take action? However, I can only say that Ling Xuanzi doesn't have much time left. Granny Snow was about to say something. Suddenly, she seemed to have noticed something. Her expression changed abruptly. Almost instinctively, she suddenly slapped the void near Wen Xiaoheng. Boom! The empty void exploded and a tall figure appeared. It was Lin Sun. He couldn't help but be surprised that this old woman had such sharp insight. Thinking so, he didn't slow down at all. As soon as his figure was seen through, the abyssal sword cauldron whistled out, wrapped in billions of Tao light, and blasted towards Wen Xiaoheng. Faced with such a sudden change, Wen Xiaoheng was so shocked that his scalp went numb. He stood up immediately and was about to dodge, but it was too late. Lin Sun's movement was too fast. As soon as he attacked, he used all his strength to strike a thunderous blow. It was extremely terrifying. Boom! In the terrible sound of collision, a figure was smashed into pieces. His skin and flesh were torn, and his tendons and bones were broken. He flew out fiercely, and the nearby tables and chairs were all burst into pieces. However, the figure that was bombarded by the abyssal sword cauldron was not Wen Xiaoheng, but Granny Snow, who rushed over to block it. This old guy blocked the fatal blow for Wen Xiaoheng as if he didn't care about his life at all. P.S. On the first day of the month, please get a guaranteed monthly ticket. Well, I can't take it anymore. After the goldfish takes a rest, it will continue to break out this month, and it will be very fierce. Chapter 25-32. Death had brushed past him in an instant, but the thrill of death almost made Wen Xiaoheng's soul fly out of his body. Almost instinctively, he rushed out of the hall and moved in the direction of the Castellan mansion as he screamed, "Murder! Ling Xuanzi killed someone!" The scream was like a thunderclap, piercing through the night sky of Starting City. In the hall, accompanied by a roar, Granny Snow was crushed by the abyssal sword cauldron and blood spurted out of her nose and mouth. She screamed crazily, "Ling Xuanzi, how dare you kill someone in the city? You must die. What about you? Is it worth it to lose your life for this guy?" Lin Sun frowned as he looked in the direction where Wen Xiaoheng escaped. Previously, he had been absolutely confident that he would be able to stop Wen Xiaoheng when he attacked again. However, who would have thought that Granny Shui, who had just suffered a heavy blow, would once again stand in front of him, allowing Wen Xiaoheng to seize the opportunity to escape. When Lin Sun wanted to chase after him, it was too late. "My life was given by young master. Why should I be afraid of dying for him?" Granny Snow screamed. She didn't give up resisting and struggled crazily as if she wanted to kill Lin Sun with her. Under normal circumstances, Lin Sun couldn't guarantee that he could kill someone who was much stronger than a Ninth Realm ancestor in a short time. But now a Granny Snow, who was seriously injured and on the verge of death, was no longer a threat. Puff! A Taoist sword swept out from the abyssal sword cauldron and killed Granny Snow on the spot. The vast sword chi engulfed her completely and turned her into ashes. Lin Sun grabbed the relics left behind by Granny Snow and turned to leave. That night, Starting City couldn't calm down. Wen Xiaoheng screamed along the way, causing a sensation in the city. Who knew how many emperors were shocked and paid attention to him? Not long after, Heng Tianxuo, who was in charge of the city, led a group of subordinates to Sky Universe Tower under Wen Xiaoheng's guidance. But at this moment Lin Sun was long gone. "Uncle, Ling Xuanzi has violated the rules of the city by committing murder in the city. Even Granny Snow died because of him. Such a bastard must be eliminated as soon as possible." Wen Xiaoheng's face was livid and terrifying. Just now, he was almost assassinated. The sudden death had caused him to be unable to calm down. Granny Shui's death had caused him to sink into a violent rage, and he was on the verge of going crazy. Heng Tianxuo's expression was gloomy as well. What happened tonight undoubtedly proved that Ling Xuanzi didn't take him, the city governor, seriously at all. "Come, let's go take a look at where Ling Xuanzi is staying." Heng Tianxuo waved his hand and brought everyone to teleport away. It was late at night. The first floor of the inn was still very lively. Lin Sun and Tan Tai Feng were drinking, and they had drunk up 19 jars of spirit. A group of practitioners were watching and cheering for them. Even though their cultivations were extremely high, the divine wine sold in this inn was brewed from various divine materials, and it was extremely strong. Up until now, both of them were drunk, but neither of them admitted defeat. When Heng Tianxua, when Xiaoheng, and the others arrived, they saw such a scene, and they couldn't help but be stunned. What was going on? At the same time, the noisy and bustling atmosphere in the inn was silent. It was like a cold wave had poured in, and everyone felt a bone-piercing killing intent. They raised their heads in unison, and all of them were shocked by Heng Tianxua's sudden arrival. They were shocked, and a thought couldn't help but arise in their hearts. What was going on? Lin Sun naturally saw Heng Tianxua, when Xiaoheng, and the others, but his expression remained calm and composed. Come on, let's continue drinking. Tan Tai Feng glanced sideways at Heng Tianxua and the others, and then he picked up his wine cup and shouted that he wanted to continue drinking with Lin Sun. Bang! When Xiaoheng smashed a table beside him with a slap and said sternly, "Besides Ling Xuanzi, all unrelated people, get lost." All of a sudden, the atmosphere in the hall was deathly silent. Tan Tai Feng seemed to be shocked, and he was more than half sober. He stood up with a frown, glanced at Heng Tianxua, and then looked at Wen Xiaoheng, and said with a cold expression, "Who did you ask to get lost? Say it again if you have the guts." The group of Emperor Realm cultivators near him had hostile expressions as well. Wen Xiaoheng was already furious, and he was about to slap Tan Tai Feng when he saw that Tan Tai Feng still dared to talk back. But his wrist was held down by Heng Tianxua. Wen Xiaoheng was stunned, and then he saw Heng Tianxua had already said, "All of you have been drinking just now?" Tan Tai Feng was much more solemn when facing Heng Tianxua, but his conceit was still not reduced, and he nodded and said, "Yes, I wonder what advice Senior has for me?" Heng Tianxua's gaze was like lightning as he glanced at everyone present, and finally his gaze fell on Lin Sun, and he said, "A murder occurred in Sky Tower earlier, and an old servant of the Wen clan's 9th realm ancestor was killed. Even when Xiaoheng was almost killed, and when Xiaoheng bluntly said that it was Ling Xuanzi who did it." Tan Tai Feng instantly seemed as if he had heard a great joke, and he burst out laughing. "Ling Xuanzi and I have been drinking here all along. How could we have the chance to kill?" Everyone near him laughed as well. All of them could testify to this. "So, Tan Tai intends to be a guarantor for this person?" Heng Tianxua took a deep look at Tan Tai Feng. Obviously, he had seen through Tan Tai Feng's identity. When Xiaoheng was stunned when he heard the words Tan Tai, and then a bright light flashed in his eyes while he frowned. "I'm not a guarantor. Everyone present here knows that Ling Xuanzi has been drinking with me all along, and the owner and attendant of this inn can prove it as well." Tan Tai Feng spoke without hesitation. When Xiaoheng grunted coldly, "Friend, you're probably completely unaware that Ling Xuanzi cultivates a clone technique. How can you be sure that the fellow you're drinking with isn't using you?" Tan Tai Feng laughed with ridicule. "Since I walked into this inn, it was I who took the initiative to drink with Ling Xuanzi. Do you think I'm using him? Are you stupid?" When Xiaoheng was instantly enraged, and he stared at Tan Tai Feng with a ghastly expression. "Do you really think that you dare to protect that bastard just because you're surnamed Tan Tai?" Tan Tai Feng's face sank as well, and he went tit for tat. "When Xiaoheng, right? Don't think that you can be lawless just because you're from an eternal emperor clan. According to my knowledge, your Wen clan isn't strong to the extent that you can do as you please in the eternal world." Seeing this scene, Lin Sun couldn't help but be surprised. Only now did he realize that Tan Tai Feng's origin was obviously far more powerful than he had imagined. His courage to be fearless of Wen Xiaoheng had fully proved this point. "Enough." Heng Tianxua stood out and stopped the two people who were at daggers drawn in the field, and said, "No matter who the murderer is, as the city governor, I will punish him severely. I will not tolerate him. This matter ends here." "Uncle." When Xiaoheng was obviously unwilling, Heng Tianxua patted him on the shoulder and said, "The murderer will pay the price for this. Don't panic." After that, he turned around and left with the crowd. When Xiaoheng glanced at Lin Sun with resentment in his eyes, and then also left. When they walked into the night, Heng Tianxua frowned and asked, "Do you know? What's the relationship between Ling Xuanzi and Tantai Feng?" When Xiaoheng shook his head, "Ling Xuanzi and I entered the vast thousand-battle domain from the gate of the Earth-Kuan realm, but I didn't know that he would be with Tantai Feng." Heng Tianxua said in a low voice, "It seems that before the trial starts, we have to investigate the relationship between the two of them, uncle. In the eternal true world, the Tantai clan is just a newly established immortal force, and they have very few people. Why do you care so much?" When Xiaoheng was puzzled. "You don't understand. Tantai Feng's grandfather, Tantai Chongkong, who is now famous in the eternal true world, is not an ordinary immortal figure. With supreme willpower, he spent 10,000 years to subdue a complete third-grade heavenly order. How can he be compared to an ordinary immortal figure?" Heng Tianxua's eyes were deep. At that time, in order to fight for this heavenly order, a total of 8 immortal realm elders from the immortal emperor clans attacked together, but in the end, they couldn't snatch this heavenly order from Tantai Feng. After this battle, Tantai Chongkong also became a second-to-none giant among the immortal figures. Even though the Tantai clan, which was built by Tantai Chongkong, has only existed for 3,000 years, if this continues in the future, there is a high possibility that it will become a top-class force of power that will be in charge of heavenly order. When he said this, Heng Tianxua could not help but sigh. With just his own strength, he had managed to gain a foothold in a place like the eternal true world and build up such a great foundation. This was practically a legend, and Tantai Chongkong was undoubtedly too terrifying. He's just an outsider. When Xiaoheng was clearly very unwilling to accept this. Since ancient times, there have been countless powerful people who have entered the eternal true world, but how many of them could be like Tantai Chongfeng and forcefully build up a country for their clan? Heng Tianxua cast a glance at Wen Xiaoheng. "It's best if we don't provoke this sort of person." Wen Xiaoheng fell silent. "Of course, tonight was an accident. In my opinion, this Ling Xuanzi shouldn't have much of a relationship with Tantai Feng. Once the trial starts, your grudge will naturally be resolved." As Heng Tianxua spoke, he led his group and disappeared into the boundless night. In the inn, the atmosphere was cold, and it was no longer as lively as before. "Brother Tantai, thank you for just now." Lin Sun cupped his hands and said. Only he and Tantai Feng were left in the field, and the others had been driven away. "What are you thanking me for? I should be the one thanking you for helping others in the Sunluo underworld." As he spoke, Tantai Feng could not help but laugh. "Actually, Wen Xiaoheng is right." Lin Sun thought for a moment and said, "The one who killed the old servant beside him was my original body." Tantai Feng was stunned. He looked at Lin Sun for a while, and said with a strange expression, "So, I was really used by you by accident?" Lin Sun nodded. "You can say that." Tantai Feng smiled bitterly. "Since you are so frank, what else can I do?" In fact, he felt much more relaxed in his heart. Previously, he had been a little suspicious. After all, it was impossible for people like Wen Xiaoheng to seek revenge for no reason. At this time, Lin Sun's frankness also completely dispelled the doubts in his heart. He picked up a jar of wine and said with a smile, "Come on, let's continue to drink. If you can drink me down, I'll forget about this trivial matter. Otherwise, I'll go to the governor's mansion to report you immediately." Lin Sun also laughed. "Then let's see who gets down first." Tantai Feng had a good temperament and was a worthy friend. This was also the reason why Lin Sun treated him frankly. At the same time, it was also a test. Fortunately, Tantai Feng's reaction did not let him down. Chapter 25-33. The sky was turning bright. Tantai Feng, who was drunk and drowsy, was supported into the room by someone. Lin Sun's eyes were drifting. After walking into the room, he ran his cultivation to dispel the effect of alcohol. Then he exhaled a long breath. In the room, Lin Sun smiled and put away his doppelganger. Then he fell into deep thought. Although he failed to assassinate Wen Xiaoheng, he killed Granny Snow, who was far more powerful than a ninth realm martial ancestor. So he gained something. Moreover, Lin Sun had obtained a considerable amount of loot from Granny Snow. There were more than 300,000 Grade 1 Eternal Void Source crystals. Other than that, there were some other imperial armaments of superb quality and various divine materials and divine medicines. Their combined value was extremely shocking as well. Among these trophies, a black treasure shaped like a magic shell caught Lin Sun's attention. The magic shell was branded with layers of strange Taoist patterns. When power was injected into it, those strange Taoist patterns would turn into lines of secret text. It said, "Frost will arrive in half a year. He must be killed. Remember to ask your young master to prepare the remaining 2 million Eternal Void Source crystals." It was because of this sentence that Lin Sun fell into deep thought. He realized that the failure of he last time did not end the assassination. Instead, it attracted a more powerful Frost. "Green Sparrow, do you know Frost from the hidden void world?" Lin Sun asked. Frost. Green Sparrow seemed to be shocked. "Is the hidden void world going to assassinate you?" Lin Sun nodded. "It should be so." Green Sparrow was stunned for a moment. After a while, she said, "You may encounter a fatal threat." Then, she told Lin Sun some of Frost's deeds. Frost. The hidden void world was the fourth most powerful emperor assassin. She was a mysterious woman who made ninth realm martial ancestor tremble with fear. Supposedly, his profound attainments in the Tao of assassination had already attained a state that could threaten the ancestor of a Tao, and he was terrifying and abnormal to the extreme. It was said that Frost had never failed since she started to carry out tasks. She was much stronger than he. It was said that all kinds of horrible rumors added a layer of mystery to Frost, which made people's hearts palpitate. At the end, Qin Kai couldn't help but be suspicious. He is already scary enough, and now he sent out Shuang. How much did Wen Xiaoheng have to pay to achieve this? All of this only proves that he has long since decided to fight me to the death. Lin Sun's eyes were cold. As long as there is a chance, I won't let him escape for the third time. Anyone who was targeted by a mysterious and unfathomable assassin force would feel like there was a dagger on their back, and they wouldn't be able to eat or sleep well. All of this was because of Wen Xiaoheng. Because of Wen Xiaoheng, Lin's plan was disrupted. Originally, he planned to break through the realm in the city, but now it was obviously impossible. The news of the assassination attempt on Wen Xiaoheng shook the entire beginning city the next morning, setting off a huge uproar. Someone actually dares to commit murder in the city. Is he tired of living? Many people were speechless. That's nothing. Wen Xiaoheng is a noble of the Immortal Emperor clan, an expert from the vast thousand world. Who dares to disrespect him? Not to mention assassinating him. That Ling Xuanzi is simply insane. However, this Ling Xuanzi is quite powerful. He wasn't caught in the act, and it's said that even the city governor Heng Tianxua couldn't do anything to him. Amazing. Discussions could be heard everywhere in the city. The assassination attempt was too shocking. It had been a long time since something like this had happened. Coupled with the fact that the assassin, Wen Xiaoheng, had an extraordinary background, one could imagine how great the commotion was. The commotion lasted for many days. When Mutian, Jade Star Absolute Emperor, Mad Scholar Emperor, Ning Daoji, and the other experts who entered the vast thousand-battle domain from the gate of Earthkuan arrived at Beginning City, they were the first to hear the news. For a moment, they couldn't help but be dumbfounded and tremble. The death of Fang Xuanzhen and the others had shocked them. Now, Ling Xuanzi had actually tried to assassinate Wen Xiaoheng in the city. This was simply like piercing through the sky. They almost couldn't believe it. Under their intentional search, they soon found Lin Sun in the inn. Unlike what they had expected, Lin Sun didn't show any signs of nervousness or worry after experiencing such a major event. Instead, he seemed extremely carefree, as if nothing had happened. All of them couldn't help but feel admiration for him. However, whether it was Mutian, Jade Star Absolute Emperor, Mad Scholar Emperor, Ning Daoji, or the others, they didn't talk much with Lin Sun. They consciously distanced themselves from him. Everyone knew that Lin Sun was in a delicate situation. He was like a disaster, and no one wanted to be involved. If Wen Xiaoheng thought that they were on Lin Sun's side, it would definitely be an undeserved disaster. In this regard, Lin Sun saw it but did not say anything. It was human nature to seek fortune and avoid calamity. Moreover, he didn't have any friendship with these people. Lin Sun didn't care about their alienation. Wen Xiaoheng hid in the city lord's mansion and never appeared in the city again. Lin Sun also gave up on the idea of killing Wen Xiaoheng in the city. Heng Tianxua might have chosen to endure the first time because of Tan Tai Feng. If it happened a second time, it would be hard to say. In the following days, Lin Sun stayed in seclusion. Although he couldn't break through to the next realm, he spent all his energy and attention on condensing the great Tao and comprehending the various inheritances. Time passed. 2 months had passed without him realizing it. Groups of cultivators came to Starting City. There were some who were even more terrifying than Ning Daoji, Mutian, and Jade Star Absolute Emperor. In fact, this was normal. Every month, a group of powerful cultivators above the martial emperor realm would enter the 8 realm gates that led to the vast 1,000-battle domain. Most of them were extraordinary overlords that were renowned throughout the universe, and those who could kill their way from the ancient nightmare battlefield to Starting City were no ordinary cultivators. As more and more powerful cultivators entered Starting City, the atmosphere in the city became more and more oppressive and austere. It was like a lake. Although it could accommodate many flood dragons, as the number of flood dragons increased, the lake would become crowded and conflict would arise. Fortunately, Heng Tianxua was in Starting City, so there wouldn't be any bloody conflicts. But everyone knew that with so many terrifying cultivators gathered in one city, there would be some trouble sooner or later. Fortunately, it was almost time for the trial secret realm to open. Out of Lin Sun's expectation, before the trial secret realm opened, Tan Tai Feng and his group left in a hurry. It was said that they had gathered enough stellar source and could continue on their journey without participating in the trial. The journey to the eternal world. This also made Lin Sun understand that a person like Tan Tai Feng didn't need to worry about wealth. He could easily buy the extremely valuable stellar source. How could he be ordinary rich? He was extremely rich. Before leaving, Tan Tai Feng personally came to bid farewell to Lin Sun and said, "If Brother Ling reaches the eternal world in the future, you can visit the Tan Tai clan of Qingyuan Mountain as a guest." Lin Sun agreed with a smile. When Tan Tai Feng left, Tan Tai Feng suddenly turned his head, blinked his eyes, and said with a smile, "Brother Ling, I heard that there is only one great emperor named Lin Sun on the Starry Sky Ancient Road, but I have never heard of the name Ling Xuanzi." Lin Sun was stunned. Tan Tai Feng had already left with a big smile. After a while, Lin Sun also smiled silently and turned back to his room. In the next few days, although the atmosphere in the city was depressed, it was unprecedentedly lively. Many people no longer practiced in seclusion. They walked on the street and entered tea-houses and restaurants to inquire about the news. The reason was that the trial secret realm would open in a few days. On this day, when Lin Sun walked out of his room, the waiter came to him with a smile and said, "Senior, the list of participants in this trial is fresh. Would you like to have one?" Lin Sun was surprised. "How much?" 1,000 eternal source crystals. The waiter quickly said, "Please don't think that I'm asking for too much. This list was circulated by the City Lord's mansion, and there's a lot of valuable information marked on it. I believe you won't be disappointed." Lin Sun thought for a while and paid for one. The waiter beamed with joy and left to find other customers to sell their wares. Lin Sun found a seat on the first floor of the inn and sat down. He ordered a pot of wine and began to look at the list in his hand. Soon, Lin Sun was surprised. There were more than 600 participants in this trial secret realm. The weakest among them was at the 5th level of the Emperor realm. People like the 9th realm ancestors were not uncommon. However, Lin Sun completely ignored this. His eyes were focused on the names of the peerless figures. There were a total of 54 peerless great emperors. They were all peerless giants from various universes in the vast thousand world. They were extremely powerful and dazzling. Their cultivation was between the 5th and 8th level. Lin Sun could not help but be shocked. He noticed that these peerless great emperors were almost all from the top 10 universes in the vast thousand world. In particular, nearly 20 of them were from the number 1 God Rising Star area. One could imagine how terrifying the God Rising Star area was. It was not an undeserved reputation to be ranked number 1 in the vast thousand world. However, Lin Sun also noticed that although there were many peerless great emperors, there was not a single one who had stepped into the 9th level. It seems that the 9th level of the Emperor realm is an insurmountable chasm for the peerless figures. Lin Sun was deep in thought. Suddenly, an exclamation sounded, "Great Sword Mountain!" 3 words, but it seemed to have an invisible deterrent that caused the bustling atmosphere on the 1st floor of the inn to strangely stop. All the customers shut their mouths and looked in the direction of the inn's entrance in shock. 5 figures appeared at the entrance of the inn and walked in. The one in the middle was handsome and had a purple gold crown on his head. He had a white jade belt around his waist. He was extraordinarily handsome and had a great majesty about him. He was like a king who had arrived and was patrolling the world. Chapter 25-34. When they saw the appearance of this person clearly, the atmosphere in the inn became even more deathly silent, and many revealed shocked expressions. Feng Junlin, one of the 4 great sword emperors of the Great Sword Mountain. A legendary figure with the title of Peerless Overlord Sword. The fame of this person had even spread in the top 10 Great Thousand world. Not long ago, when Feng Junlin's group arrived at Starting City, it caused quite a stir, and people went to visit them ceaselessly. Now, Feng Junlin was a peak 8th level sword emperor that was the center of attention in Starting City, and the Overlord Sword Monarch was invincible. So strong. His aura is restrained, and his domineering aura seeps into his bones. Just by looking at his aura, he already far surpasses everyone else. This was the evaluation of many people, and it caused others to feel fearful. This was absolutely a terrifying figure that was formidable to the extreme. Feng Junlin had a pair of vertical pupils, a violet gold crown, a white jade belt, and a majestic bearing. When he walked, he was truly like a king that had arrived. There were men and women that followed behind him, and all of them possessed monstrous auras. Each of them had their own unique proud aura, but before Feng Junlin they were much dimmer. Lin Sun, who was looking through the trial list, noticed the appearance of Feng Junlin's group as well. Especially Feng Junlin, his aura was so strong that he couldn't help but take another look. Moreover, he had vaguely determined Feng Junlin's identity in his heart. Because on the trial list in his hand, there was a record of Feng Junlin of the Great Sword Mountain. It was said that Feng Junlin was from the 1st universe in the sectors, the Ascension Star region, and that he possessed rare talent and unfathomable cultivation. But right after that, Lin Sun withdrew his gaze. According to the records on the trial list, Feng Junlin was indeed very famous, but in the current Starting City, there were many that could compare to Feng Junlin. As soon as Feng Junlin arrived, his violet pupils swept the surroundings, and he said, "I heard that Ling Xuanzi who assassinated Wen Xiaoheng is staying in this inn?" Swoosh. With just a single sentence, practically everyone looked at Lin Sun with different expressions. Only now did they understand that Feng Junlin had come for Ling Xuanzi. On the other hand, Lin Sun frowned and looked at Feng Junlin, and he said, "What's the matter?" Feng Junlin also looked at Lin Sun up and down and said, "You have a dignified temperament and a unique charm. Not bad. You didn't let me down." This evaluation caused everyone to be bewildered, and they didn't know what it meant. Next to Feng Junlin, an old man in a jade robe with his hair tied up in a bun smiled and said, "Ling Xuanzi, my young master has heard about your situation and knows that you're in danger. If you're willing to submit to my young master might be able to help you resolve some of your troubles." When these words were spoken, an uproar broke out, all of them shocked. The fact that Feng Junlin dared to meddle in Wen Xiaoheng's business was enough to prove that Feng Junlin had a great deal of confidence and support. He was not afraid of Wen Xiaoheng at all. However, no one expected that Feng Junlin was actually here to make use of this opportunity to recruit Ling Xuanzi to serve him. For a period of time, envious expressions appeared on many people's faces. Being able to follow the ultimate tyrant's sword from Greatsword Mountain was naturally an incredibly good thing. At the very least, they could travel further in the Great Thousand Battles regions. It would not be difficult for them to even reach the eternal true world alive. This was enough to excite people. There were also people who sneered in their hearts. Even Ling Xuanzi dared to assassinate Wen Xiaoheng in the city, and came out unscathed. How could such a peerless and ruthless person be willing to serve others? Lin Sun himself was stunned for a moment, and he couldn't help but smile. "Do you know that getting involved in this will result in the consequences? Will you suffer?" Feng Junlin's lips curled up, as if he thought Lin Sun's words were ridiculous. The old man in a jade robe beside him laughed. "Haha, it seems that you still don't know the true power of Greatsword Mountain. I can tell you that what happened to you is nothing more than a small matter to my young master. There are no consequences to speak of." His voice was filled with incomparable conceit and arrogance. Everyone's heart was in turmoil again. They were shocked by these words. Lin Sun said indifferently, "Is that so? Then let me ask you, can you fight against the threat from the Hidden Void Realm?" Hidden Void Realm. The atmosphere suddenly became strangely oppressive. Feng Junlin frowned. The faces of the old man in a jade robe and others changed slightly, but after a moment they still said calmly, "The Hidden Void Realm is a force of assassins. With the protection of our Greatsword Mountain, I think they will realize who they can offend and who they can't." Lin Sun said, "What if I tell you that it won't be long before an assassin named Shuang comes to us?" Shuang. Many people didn't understand. But many people's faces had changed greatly. Obviously, they knew how horrible Shuang was. Even Feng Junlin was frowning. As for the old man in a jade robe and others, they couldn't laugh anymore. They all looked at Feng Junlin in surprise. Obviously, the threat from Shuang made them not dare to speak rashly. Seeing this, Lin Sun couldn't help laughing. He drank a cup of wine by himself and said, "You want to use this matter to make me, Ling Xuanzi, lower my head and work for you. You are too naive. While there is still room for negotiation, I advise you to leave as soon as possible, lest Wen Xiaoheng learns about this and hates you for it." His words caused the expressions of the jade-robed old man and the others to fluctuate. Their chests felt stuffy and they felt like they were about to lose face. Originally, they were very arrogant and regarded Lin Sun as a drowning man. They tried to take this opportunity to subdue him and work for Feng Junlin. Who would have thought? Lin Sun had made such a big mistake. Shuang had come in person. This matter was undoubtedly too hot. It was beyond their expectation and caught them off guard, which made them feel very embarrassed. In particular, Lin Sun's words were faintly sarcastic, which made them feel uncomfortable all over. What a pity! Feng Junlin sighed softly, took a deep look at Lin Sun, and then turned away. The old man in a jade robe and the others hurriedly followed him. When this scene fell into the eyes of the people, they couldn't help but have a strange feeling. They always felt that Feng Junlin and the others left with a trace of failure and embarrassment. Of course, no one dared to say anything. Whether Feng Junlin was embarrassed or not, He was a terrible person they could offend. When they looked at Lin Sun again, they couldn't help but look complicated. Assassinating Wen Xiaoheng, offending Heng Tianxua, the governor's mansion, and now being targeted by Shuang, the legendary assassin who ranked fourth in the hidden void world, for any emperor realm. Each of these things was enough to make them collapse, but Ling Xuanzi still had the leisure to drink. Didn't he know that he would be in great trouble at any time? Lin Sun didn't care about this. He drank up the wine in his cup and got up to return to his room. On the same day, the news that Feng Junlin was defeated by Lin Sun spread throughout the starting city and became a joke. And the news that Shuang was targeting Lin Sun also made many people feel cold. Being targeted by such a legendary assassin before entering the eternal world, how could he have a chance to survive? This Ling Xuanzi would be finished sooner or later. However, compared to the upcoming secret territory trials, this news only caused some discussion. What people were more concerned about was how many people would be able to walk out of this trial alive, and how many people would be able to gather enough stellar source. A few days later, at dawn, the sound of a horn spread in the sky above the starting city. It was vast and heavy as if it came from ancient times. The secret realm of the trial would open today. In the city, everyone who participated in the trial had already moved and gathered in a huge square in front of the governor's mansion. It was dark and crowded. Although it wasn't a sea of people, everyone present was a great emperor who had walked out of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. There were more than 600 people, and when the aura released by each of them gathered together, it was as if gods had descended to the world. When Lin Sun arrived, he also attracted a lot of attention. When Xiaoheng was among them, and his eyes were filled with bone-chilling hatred. Lin Sun glanced at him as if he was looking at a dead man, and he didn't bother to look at him a second time. This made Wen Xiaoheng's face turn even colder and gloomier. Feng Junlin and the others were also there. When they saw Lin Sun, a hint of coldness appeared on their faces. Now, the news of them being defeated by Lin Sun had become a joke in the city, and it made them feel disgusted as if they had eaten a fly. Lin Sun didn't care about that. He looked around and saw Mutian, Jade Star Absolute Emperor, Mad Scholar Emperor, Ning Daoji, and other familiar faces. However, they seemed to be intentionally avoiding Lin Sun's gaze, as if they wanted to distance themselves from him. Lin Sun's heart didn't waver, and he just stood there casually. There was an empty area around him, and no one approached him. It wasn't because they were afraid of him, but because they were afraid of getting involved with him and getting into trouble. Obviously, in the eyes of the crowd, he was already a troublesome character that was like a calamity. Only Lin Sun seemed to be unaware of it. He stood alone with his hands behind his back, calm and composed. In the distance, a thin monk in linen clothes appeared. It was Yun Lu from the minor Lane Temple of the Great Lane World. His eyes were clear, and there was a trace of abstruse zen in them. He took in everything that had happened, and he couldn't help but smile. A phrase appeared in his mind. Flocks of sheep and beasts travel alone. Heng Tianxua appeared in front of the city lord's mansion. He was dressed in a plain robe, and he looked elegant and quiet. The space around him was distorted, and the progenitor qi that emanated from him suppressed everyone present. Many martial emperors were shocked. In the silence, Heng Tianxua said, "Today, the trial's secret realm will open for a month. The rules are simple. Those who collect 10 complete stellar sources can step onto the ancient teleportation portal and continue forward. The trial's secret realm is divided into 9 areas. After entering the trial's secret realm, the identification in your hands will guide you to the corresponding area. Only in the corresponding area will you be able to use the identification in your hands to open the entrance to the secret realm and leave. Also, I have to remind you that many martial emperors have died in the trial's secret realm in the past." With that, Heng Tianxua waved his hand, and a group of heavily armored soldiers walked out. P.S. Something happened, so the second update will be a little late. Chapter 25-35. The leader of this group of soldiers was a majestic man dressed in navy blue heavy armor. This was the commander of the city guards, a powerful figure who was just a hair away from entering the Tao ancestor realm. His name was Horizontal War. Next, I will bring you to the trial's secret realm. Heng Zhan's eyes were like lightning as he waved the bronze halberd in his hand. A shocking bolt of lightning descended, causing the void to explode. An ancient and modeled Taoist altar appeared in front of everyone. Boom! A huge beam of divine light shot out from Heng Zhan's hand and pierced through the void. It tore open a wide spatial tunnel on the altar, leading to the unknown shore. Depart! Zhan led a group of heavily armored soldiers and was the first to step onto the altar. More than 600 great emperors who were participating in the trial streamed in. As he watched them leave one by one, a trace of a cold light flashed imperceptibly in the depths of Heng Tianshua's eyes, and he muttered in his heart, "Ling Xuanzi, going against the order of the city, has to pay the price of death." Space changed, and the stars moved. Walking on the spatial passageway on the Tao altar was like walking backwards in time, and step by step, they walked towards the primordial era. A primordial aura assaulted their faces, and everyone felt as if space and time were in disorder. It was like they had experienced 10,000 years of ups and downs in an instant. The scene before his eyes was filled with multicolored and gorgeous light. It transformed into divine rays of light that drifted about, and he was occasionally able to see expanse after expanse of the starry sky being left behind. After an unknown period of time, everyone trembled and rushed out of the passageway, arriving in an ice-cold universe. "That's the land of exile?" someone exclaimed with shock. At the end of the universe was an extremely enormous world that seemed like a lone island that lay across the depths of the starry sky, and it emanated an aura of the ages. Every now and then, a bright and enormous star would fall into the enormous world as if it was pulled, and then it would vanish in the blink of an eye, as if it was swallowed. How enormous was the star! Yet before the enormous world, it was like an insect that was swallowed by the star one after the other. This strange scene caused the hearts of countless people to tremble with fear. This was the secret realm of trials, also known as the land of exile. Supposedly, this world was originally a kingdom of gods from the last era, and the gods resided there. There were numerous inconceivable and legendary figures there. But with the end of the era, this godly kingdom suffered an unprecedented attack and destruction. Now it is regarded as the land of exile that is hated by all. I've heard of it as well. Since the ancient times, there have been many eternal figures that stepped into it with the intention of seeking the secrets of the last era. However, all of them perished without exception. A Realm 9 ancestor said with a serious expression, "The reason is that the exiled grounds are filled with strange disasters that target undying figures. Anyone who enters will die without a doubt, and only Emperor Realm figures don't have to worry about encountering such strange disasters." Everyone was discussing among themselves. Clearly, they had all heard about this trial mystic realm. The guard commander, Heng Zhan, led everyone to fly through the universe, and it wasn't long before they arrived at the distant world that was filled with a mysterious glow. Boom! Coincidentally, an enormous star streaked past, dragging along a dazzling brilliance that seemed like it was burning as it fell into that world. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared as if it had been devoured. The scene of the star being devoured made everyone restless again. This mysterious land of exile had existed since the end of the last era, experiencing the vicissitudes of life. It had an unknown and mysterious aura. You all know that this trial mystic realm is divided into 9 regions, and each region is filled with different dangers. What you need to do is to collect Star Source and survive. Heng Zhan spoke with a voice that rumbled like thunder. Remember, you only have 1 month. Swish! As soon as he finished speaking, someone dashed out first, teleported through the void, and rushed into the trial mystic realm. Following that, people dashed out one after another, and almost all of them traveled in group. No one flinched or hesitated. They were all powerful figures who had stepped onto the road of emperors through countless battles. Whether it was in terms of state of mind or courage, they were all extraordinary. Divine light flowed around. Feng Junlin and his group moved out too, and they attracted a lot of attention. Apart from that, Lin Sun also noticed that there were many powerful figures who weren't inferior to Feng Junlin in terms of temperament and power. Some stepped on huge green gourds, dressed in Taoist robes with big sleeves fluttering in the wind. When they opened and closed their eyes, chaotic qi filled the air. Some had smooth skin and graceful bearing. They were bathed in the divine light, as if they were in a dream. With every step they took, golden lotus flowers bloomed under their feet. Some were like gods and demons, with cold eyes like knives, sweeping across the starry sky with monstrous, killing intent. Some looked weak and ordinary, but when they walked, they were in harmony with heaven and earth, resonating with the Great Way, and vaguely, ancient chanting could be heard. Every one of them was almost at the peak of the 8th level of Emperor Realm. Although their power was different, they all had an invincible and disdainful demeanor. Lin Sun had to pay attention to them. When he saw Wen Xiaoheng leaving with a group of Emperor Realm figures, Lin Sun couldn't help but be surprised. It should be known that Granny Snow and other Emperor Realm figures who followed Wen Xiaoheng before were all killed by him. But now, Wen Xiaoheng had so many Emperor Realm figures with him, which was incredible. However, for Lin Sun, it was enough to ensure that Wen Xiaoheng also participated in the trial. Because this time, he would not give Wen Xiaoheng a chance to leave alive. Soon, Lin Sun also took action. He moved through the void and flew away. I'm afraid this guy doesn't know that as long as he enters the trial, he will die. Seeing Lin Sun's action, Hengzhan showed a trace of imperceptible pity in his eyes. In next to no time, all the cultivators that were participating in the trials had vanished from the world of trials. This was a world full of desolation. The sky was high and the clouds were wide. Towering ancient mountains could be seen everywhere, vast and boundless. However, there was not a single blade of grass growing here. It was a scene of withered and desolation. There was no vitality. There was no breath of the Great Way. It was like a world of ruins left behind in the endless years of destruction. Clatter with a wave of void fluctuation, Lin Sun's figure appeared. The first thing he saw was such a desolate and primitive world. However, before Lin Sun could take a closer look, there was a sudden change. Boom! A peerlessly sharp divine arrow tore through the sky and suddenly shot out from the void on one side. It was unbelievably fast. Lin Sun waved his sleeve. With a bang, the arrow exploded 3 feet in front of him, and a rain of light scattered. But this was just the beginning. The ground suddenly caved in, and countless dense snow-white saber qis swept out. At the same time, from different directions of Lin Sun, there were extremely terrifying attacks whistling towards him. There was a golden whip smashing the void like a golden dragon coming out of the abyss. There was a colorful jade rui. When it came across the sky, it reflected the shadow of many holy mountains, covering the sky and the sun. There was a copper bell rumbling, an alms bowl spewing out rays of light, and an axe splitting the void and chopping towards Lin Sun in the blink of an eye. The entire area was covered by a terrifying attack. Every kind of Taoism was peerless and terrible. Every kind of emperor weapon was shining with a brilliance that could destroy the world. When all these things burst out at the same time, it seemed that Lin Sun and the world where Lin Sun was were going to be destroyed. It was too horrible and happened too fast. Who could imagine that such a disaster would come to them as soon as they entered the trial? In this sudden attack, even Lin Sun had no way to retreat or avoid it. But there was not much fluctuation on his face. Only his eyes suddenly became extremely cold. Then, the abyssal sword cauldron roared out and suddenly shone brightly. Hundreds of millions of lights flowed and evolved into a big abyss across the world. Lin Sun, on the other hand, leaped up and rushed in one direction. His cultivation was released to the extreme. He didn't hold back at all. It was not terrible to be besieged. He just needed to seize a point and kill his way out as soon as possible. Rumble, the world was shaking and completely in disorder. Many terrible forces and treasures covered the area and directly destroyed it. The violent aura of destruction raged. The mountains and rivers within 1,000 miles were razed to the ground in an instant. The void was crushed into pieces like a piece of paper. "How is it?" In the billowing smoke and dust, a voice sounded. "He should be dead." In the nearby area, a low voice sounded. "If we attack together, we can easily kill any ancestor of the 9th realm, not to mention a 6th-level emperor realm." Low voices of conversation sounded. In the billowing smoke and dust, figures appeared one after another, and their aura was extremely terrifying. There were more than 20 people, and in the place where Lin Sun was originally, a huge bottomless ravine was blasted out. It was still filled with the torrent of destruction, raging and roaring. "Oh, we have been planning for a long time. Isn't it easy to kill this guy?" A skinny old man twisted his beard and smiled. He held a colorful ancient seal in his hand, and it was extremely powerful. It was a 9th realm ancestor. "No, it's fine if he's killed and turned into ashes, but why don't I see Ling Xuanzi's relics?" someone said with surprise. Could it be? The skinny old man holding the ancient seal was stunned, and was about to release his divine sense to investigate. Right at this moment, a slender hand appeared out of thin air, and it suddenly grabbed the skinny old man's neck and twisted it lightly. Crack! His head was twisted off, and blood sprayed out like a fountain and dyed the void red. Immediately after, the skinny old man's figure was shattered into countless pieces of flesh and blood that fell to the ground. In the blink of an eye, these pieces of flesh and blood seemed to have been incinerated, and they turned into a pungent smoke that suffused the air. Turned into ashes. And at the place where the skinny old man stood, a tall figure appeared out of thin air. Chapter 25:36. It was so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. That tall figure had messy hair, tattered clothes and a pale face. He looked rather pathetic. That person was Lin Sun. Even though he'd neutralized and resisted more than half of the might of that sudden and terrifying attack, he still couldn't avoid being injured. But even then, when they saw this scene, everyone was stunned and they were flabbergasted. "He's not dead? How can he still be alive? Old ancestor Long Yuan was killed just like that," screams rang out. Who would have thought that someone could survive the siege of more than 20 great emperors? The most terrifying thing was, with just a stretch of his hand, Lin Sun twisted the neck of a 9th realm ancestor, took off his head, crushed it into ashes, and died suddenly. It was shocking. An invisible chill surged into the great emperors' hearts like a tide, making their scalps tingle. How ruthless was this person? "I have no enmity with you, why did you ambush me here?" Lin Sun's eyes were terrifyingly cold. He saw everyone's faces clearly. They were all unfamiliar and he didn't know them at all. However, no one answered him. Everyone's expression was cold. Attack. He's already injured and isn't invincible. This is the best time to kill him. After the initial shock, these great emperors closed in on Lin Sun from different directions. All the martial emperors who were able to kill their way to Starting City and participate in the trial were all ruthless characters who had experienced slaughter and had a mind of steel. Many of them were formidable overlords of a world, and they rose to power amidst bloodshed and slaughter. Whoosh, all sorts of divine lights circulated, and some powerful monarch weapons were gathering power. The treasures of these great emperors were naturally extraordinary and terrifying. Dao swords that shot into the sky, bronze umbrellas that covered the sky, divine whips that were thousands of feet long, giant seals that were like divine mountains. All of them were dazzling and filled the surroundings with killing intent. One had to admit that this was a group of terrifying characters. If they were on the ancient path of the stars, they would be able to do whatever they wanted. Ling Xuanzi, I'm not afraid to tell you that any expert who enters the trial will kill you as soon as they have the chance. No matter how much you struggle, it's all in vain. An eighth great emperor that seemed like a youth spoke indifferently with a proud and extraordinary bearing. Lin Sun raised his eyebrows and immediately showed a sneer. Really? Then I don't mind treating this place as my grave to bury all my enemies. His black hair fluttered in the wind, and his gaze was like cold lightning. He didn't conceal his aura in the slightest as he released it. Instantly, it surged like an ocean and swept through the boundless earth. Everyone's expression was stagnant. Lin Sun was not afraid at all, which made them feel awestruck, and their expressions became extremely dignified. Kill! Without hesitation, they attacked together. The ancient bronze umbrella covered the sky, and the divine mountain seal smashed into the ground. All kinds of monarch weapons danced in the air, as if they could topple the mountains and overturn the seas, terrifying to the extreme. The most terrifying thing was that there were a few secret treasures with terrifying destructive power that could seriously threaten an existence at the level of a ninth realm ancestor. They were vicious and ruthless. At the same time, various profound and unfathomable restrictions of the Tao surged into appearance and swept out to envelop this expanse of the sky. Obviously, there was someone amongst this group that possessed extraordinary attainments in the Tao of markings, and he'd activated a formation. Almost in an instant, this piece of heaven and earth fell into chaos again. The earth sank thousands of feet, and all the mountains disappeared. The void cracked open, and the raging torrent of power spread out. Wherever it passed, there was a terrible scene of destruction. More than 20 great emperors attacked together, and no one hid anything. All of them were ruthless and had a strong fighting consciousness. Now that they attacked with all their strength, it was enough to frighten ghosts and gods. If it were someone else, even a ninth realm ancestor who had been cultivating for many years, he would definitely die at this moment, because there was no way to avoid this kind of siege. But Lin Sun had already fought his way out of the siege, and he was prepared. How could he be besieged again? As early as when everyone started to attack, his figure flickered, and with a strange shake, he appeared thousands of miles away. These opponents were very ruthless. They used Taoism, monarch weapons, restrictions, secret treasures, and everything. It was no problem for them to kill any ninth realm ancestor, and they could even threaten an ancestor. If it weren't for the fact that this was a trial world, they would definitely be able to destroy a part of the starry sky and a plane of a world. He actually avoided it. He's over there. Everyone looked up and saw Lin Sun. Suddenly, their hearts sank and they felt a chill. At this moment, although Lin Sun was standing there alone, he had an aura that could swallow thousands of miles. His divine bearing was supreme, and he looked down on the world. Everyone looked at each other, and they all showed a fierce expression. Kill! For existences like them, a distance of thousands of miles could be reached in one teleport. If they let Lin Sun escape this time, they might not have such an opportunity again. Moreover, up to this point, Lin Sun had not shown any means that could make them completely afraid, which made them think that there was still hope. And at this moment, boom! Lin Sun took the initiative to attack first. He took a step forward, and the world trembled and the stars moved. With monstrous divine light, he attacked. The abyssal sword cauldron roared, and like a great abyss that could swallow the sky, it appeared above Lin Sun's head. His attack was simple and direct. A sword chi shot out, and the sword chi swept across 3,000 miles. The sword light swept the ground, and the mountains 1,000 miles away were all blown away. Puff! The person in the front split open and then collapsed. Together with his monarch weapon, he exploded into a bloody mist, crushed by the extremely fierce sword chi. Boom! As Lin Sun raised his hands and feet, there was the sound of landslides and tsunamis. The Taoist light around him was monstrous. He was like a demon, matchless and matchless. He cut out the sword chi like landslides and tsunamis, showing the true meaning of life and death with one sword. In an instant, another 3 great emperors were killed. The bloody mist pervaded, and even the 2 terrible monarch weapons and the power of many prohibitions were broken. The Taoist light was boiling, and the horror was boundless. Lin Sun opened a bloody way with his supreme killing means in the original encirclement and charge. Is he still a human? How can he be so strong? Some people were frightened, and their souls were trembling. Buzz! A big seal as heavy and majestic as a divine mountain fell down. This was a famous monarch weapon, which had the power to suppress the universe and crush the sun and moon. However, Lin Sun's killing intent was monstrous. The Taoist light all over his body covered the sun, moon, and stars. Like a god descending to the world, Lin Sun slapped the seal high in the sky and knocked it away, and cracks appeared on it. "Who did we offend?" Exclamations sounded. The originally calm and composed emperors were all terrified at this moment, and for the first time, they regretted their decision. Only when they fought head-on did they realize how terrifying Ling Xuanzi's power was. Boom! The abyssal sword cauldron rumbled, and in the rumbling sound, the lower half of a realm 9 great ancestors' body instantly turned into a bloody mist, completely shattered. He screamed miserably, and the upper half of his body flew backward. His hair was disheveled, and his face was full of fear. However, a Taoist sword suddenly swept out of the abyssal sword cauldron. With a flash, the sword edge cut off the remaining half of his body, and his soul scattered. "Save me!" Someone screamed in horror. But Lin Sun's eyes burst out with divine light, intertwining into a pair of clanging divine swords, and slashed out in the void, drawing a E character. The trajectory of the word E. Immediately, another tyrannical figure was killed. This was a peerless great emperor at the 6th level of the emperor realm. He thought that since he was in the same realm as Lin Sun, he wouldn't be afraid. Who would have thought that he would be killed by Lin Sun in just one move? Many people's hair stood on end and their faces turned pale. Lin Sun was simply a god of death, and they had provoked a demon king that they shouldn't have provoked. In fact, Lin Sun indeed looked extremely terrifying at this moment. With his cultivation, he used the abyssal sword cauldron to open the way, killing in all directions. Every single move he made revealed a domineering and invincible demeanor, and he swept through everything before him. The mountains and valleys were all turned into dust, destroyed like paper. How could they fight like this? The battle had just started, and Lin Sun was like a demon god descending to the world. Until now, 6 great emperors had died on the spot, and their blood was dripping. Demon god! These people screamed in their hearts, and their faces turned pale. They felt a sense of powerlessness, and their bodies couldn't help but tremble. They had never been so afraid before. Puff! Blood splashed out, and Lin Sun's expression was indifferent. His eyes flashed with cold lightning, and the abyssal sword cauldron rumbled, smashing another person into pieces. The formidable combat strength that he revealed at this moment was terrifying. With a single move, he could easily kill an Emperor Realm expert, tear him into pieces, and destroy both his body and soul. The killing continued, and an inexplicable anger surged in Lin Sun's heart. Since entering the City of Beginnings, he had kept a low profile and tried not to make trouble. Who would have thought that as soon as he entered the trial world, he would be ambushed and attacked from all directions? If he didn't have strong enough cultivation, he would have been killed at the first moment. Under such circumstances, how could Lin Sun not be angry? Therefore, when he attacked, he showed no mercy, and looked extremely cold. Go! Run! Amidst horrified sharp cries, the remaining cultivators fled in panic and charged towards all directions. Now everyone could see that this was a demon god, and those who opposed him would die. Even the ancestors of the ninth realm could not withstand a single blow from him. Want to leave? Too late. Lin Sun snorted. Since he had chosen to attack, he would kill them directly. He would not be soft-hearted. Fellow practitioner, please spare my life. I know I was wrong. I shouldn't have been instigated to encircle you. An old man was caught up with, and begged for mercy with a pale face. He almost knelt there. Lin Sun didn't even look at him. He pressed his finger, and the old man's forehead was pierced, and a flower of blood splashed out. The horror on his face froze, and he fell straight in a pool of blood. Boom! All of a sudden, an ancient bronze umbrella that blotted out the sky and covered the sun fell. Millions upon millions of rays of light fell. Those were divine chains that interweaved in the sky. They seemed to be cast from divine gold, dazzling and suppressing Lin Sun. This was a formidable emperor weapon that blotted out the sky and formed a terrifying domain that seemed capable of confining mountains and rivers. Being enveloped within it was like being sent to hell, like being confined as a prisoner. This vile creature has been suppressed. Everyone, quickly kill him. A middle-aged man that looked like a scholar shouted loudly, his voice filled with excitement. The ancient bronze umbrella was one of his great killing weapons. At this moment, it unexpectedly trapped Lin Sun in it. As the scholar recited ancient and obscure scriptures, the ancient bronze umbrella seemed to wake up from silence, and strange symbols emerged like a tide, releasing boundless chi of imprisonment. Chapter 25:37. Seeing that Lin Sun was trapped, the expressions of many changed, and they activated various sovereign weapons to slash at Lin Sun. This was indeed an opportunity. Activate the forbidden weapons and kill him. Someone roared with a grim voice, and his eyes were ferocious. He hated Lin Sun to the extreme. Everyone, we have no way out. No one can escape in this trial world, so we can only kill him. Otherwise, even if we can escape now, we'll still die if he encounters us in the future. A black-robed man's eyes were gloomy as he spat out mouthfuls of scarlet and bloody talismans, and then he sacrificed them. Swish! The talisman suddenly enlarged, and it transformed into a blood-colored diagram that covered an area of 30 kilometers. It shattered the ground, annihilated the sky, and revealed a strange scene of demons wreaking havoc in the world. It descended together with the ancient bronze umbrella, and they trapped Lin Sun within them as if they wanted to refine him into a pool of blood. The air was hazy, and ghosts and gods howled. Quick, this is a rare opportunity. Kill him. Everyone, don't shrink back. This is the moment to annihilate this bastard. The others cried out when they saw this. Their originally terrified hearts transformed into a type of indescribable ecstasy at this moment. Lin Sun frowned. This ancient bronze umbrella was very special. Besides being a terrifying sovereign weapon, it also contained a strange willpower, and it seemed to be the aura of a Tao ancestor. Moreover, the blood-colored talisman wasn't simple either. It contained a dense forbidden spell, and there were countless phantoms of souls howling within it. It was extremely horrifying. Kill, we must kill him. Amidst the loud cries, numerous sovereign weapons whistled as they shuttled between the heavens and the earth. They flowed with monstrous divine radiance, and their murderous intent shook the 9 heavens. This was a catastrophe. All sorts of light exploded, and all of them charged up, causing the heavens and the earth to be riddled with holes and ruined beyond recognition. This time, he should be dead, right? A person spoke with a trembling voice. No, he's not dead. In the next moment, everyone present was shocked. In the distance, the light of the Tao surged into the sky. An ancient bronze umbrella had actually been seized by Lin Sun, and he'd teleported it to another area. That round of extremely terrifying and destructive attacks from before still hadn't hit him, and it had only destroyed an area. No! Suddenly, the scholarly man screamed in anger. Lin Sun casually pressed the ancient bronze umbrella into the abyssal sword cauldron, and the scholarly man, whose connection had been severed, spat out a mouthful of blood, his face as pale as a sheet. This scene shocked some people to the point that their scalps went numb. Snatching an ancient emperor weapon with his bare hands. Everyone, don't panic. He hasn't broken free from the shackles yet. He's still suppressed by my great blood demon talisman. The black-robed man let out a long howl. Everyone, quickly attack and kill him. Everyone looked up and saw that the blood-colored talismans were rolling around where Lin Sun was, forming a terrible blood-colored ripple that suppressed Lin Sun. Kill. Everyone took action again, all of them activating all kinds of secret treasures without any regard for the price. Brilliant lights overflowed, submerging that place. Buzz. In Lin Sun's abyssal sword cauldron, a simple and unadorned Taoist sword emerged, flowing with shimmering purple brilliance, and chopped at the bloody talisman. The sword light was like a rainbow, clanging. Although the blood-colored talisman was a very strange secret treasure, it was constantly cracked. Finally, in a dazzling light, the blood-colored talisman suddenly exploded, turning into a sky full of blood-colored light rain that swept in all directions. Lin Sun sighed in his heart. Originally, he had planned to subdue this treasure, but unfortunately, the situation was urgent, and he had to destroy it with brute force. My treasure! The black-robed man screamed in shock, as if his heart and flesh had been destroyed. At this time, Lin Sun had already launched a counterattack. Like a god descending to the mortal world, he was invincible. He attacked one after another with the abyssal sword cauldron, smashing several weapons in the world, splitting mountains and seas. His supernatural power was immeasurable. Now, the battle was one-sided, and there was no more suspense. The remaining emperors didn't dare to take any chances, and fled again with fear in their hearts. Previously, the siege and attack couldn't kill him. Even with the help of secret treasures, they couldn't kill him. Under such circumstances, who didn't know that Lin Sun was not someone they could fight against at all? Taoism Pier, we can sit down and talk. Stop for the time being. I'm willing to pay a price that will satisfy you. I only ask for my life. Someone was caught by Lin Sun. He was so scared that he begged bitterly. As soon as his voice fell, he was slapped into a bloody mud by Lin Sun and died on the spot. Lin Sun didn't stop and continued to chase. There were only a dozen or so emperors left. Although they fled in all directions, Lin Sun had already remembered their breaths and appearances. Boom! Woody's spiritual bow was pulled up. In the raging sound of wind and thunder, the blue arrow burst into the sky. A few hundred kilometers away, a figure that was fleeing in panic was suddenly blasted apart. He was killed by a single arrow, and his body and Dao vanished. Another person was killed. Lin Sun rushed in another direction with great speed. The person he was pursuing was a woman in blue clothes. She seemed to have noticed that the situation was bad, so she suddenly gritted her teeth as she fled and withdrew a string of crimson-red bells. After that, she opened her mouth and spat out a few tens of mouthfuls of blood essence. Instantly, the crimson-red bells seemed as if they'd eaten their fill, and they emanated a wave of bewitching and horrifying chimes. The woman in blue seemed to have lost most of her life and became very weak. Obviously, she had paid a heavy price. She suddenly crushed the red bells. Bang! The magnificent red rain of light drifted and disappeared in the void. At the same time, Lin Sun's hair stood on end and his body was in pain. It seemed that a peerless weapon was about to pierce his heart, which posed an extreme threat. It was too sudden. Lin Sun was shocked. At this moment, he did not hesitate to put the abyssal sword cauldron around him. Clang! A deafening explosion resounded. An incomparably strange crimson needle, as thin as a cow's hair, was narrowly blocked by the abyssal sword cauldron, and then exploded. The resulting torrent of power shook Lin to the point that he staggered. And in the distance, puff! The woman in blue coughed up a mouthful of blood, showing a look of despair. This was her trump card, and she had to pay half of the price of Tao. Who would have thought that it would still be blocked? I'll kill you! The woman in blue screamed and rushed towards Lin Sun as if her body was burning. Obviously, she intended to die together with him. Lin Sun looked indifferent. His combat power was extremely strong. With a palm strike, the figure of the woman in blue exploded in the air. Then, Lin Sun did not stop and still chased after her. "Brother, why do you force me like this?" Soon, a gray-haired man was caught up with and couldn't help shouting in grief and indignation. But Lin Sun didn't care at all. He stepped forward and kicked out. The gray-haired man's head was broken into pieces and he was killed on the spot. However, when Lin Sun wanted to chase the remaining 6 or 7 enemies, they had already disappeared in different directions. Lin Sun was only one person after all, and he didn't intend to expose his 5 doppelgangers at this moment, so he couldn't go to different directions to kill the enemies. Lin Sun immediately stopped and his eyes were cold. He wasn't willing to give up. As long as he was in this trial world, he was confident that he could kill all the enemies one by one. He turned around and went back the way he came. At the same time, the remaining people had long been scared out of their wits. They had never been as desperate as they were today. In the past, they dominated a region with immeasurable power and looked up to all living beings in the world. But now they were being chased like dogs. When the two were compared, one couldn't help but sigh. On the battlefield, it was a scene of destruction. Lin Sun returned and planned to clean up the spoils of war. But just when he was about to do it, he suddenly sensed something and couldn't help snorting. "Looting a burning house? You're courting death." As soon as he said that, Lin Sun was like an immortal furnace, emitting a monstrous Tao light. His entire body rushed out, looking more terrifying than a god. He punched out. Boom! In a place far away, the void exploded, and a figure was violently jolted back. It was a young man in a luxurious robe. Panic flashed in his eyes, and he said with a gloomy face, "Ling Xuanzi, I have no enmity with you. Why are you attacking me? My spoils of war are not something you can touch." As Lin Sun spoke, the abyssal sword cauldron had already whistled out. In the blink of an eye, the young man in a luxurious robe was smashed into blood. Lin Sun raised his hand and waved, putting away the storage treasure on the young man. After doing all this, Lin Sun's eyes were like lightning as he glanced in all directions and said coldly, "You can watch the battle in the dark, but don't blame me for being rude if anyone dares to have any wild thoughts." His voice spread in all directions. After that, he began to clean up the battlefield. During the previous battle, Lin Sun had already noticed that there were many terrifying auras hidden in the dark, and they were all watching the battle. But they didn't get involved, and Lin Sun couldn't be bothered to pay attention to them. Who would have thought that when he returned just now, the young man in a luxurious robe would take advantage of his absence to snatch the spoils of war, and that was intolerable to Lin Sun. In the dark, many cultivators had ugly expressions. They were quite displeased by Lin Sun's rude warning, but no one dared to jump out. In the previous battle, the terrifying killing power that Lin Sun displayed had already shocked them, and they didn't dare to challenge Lin Sun. For a time, many people left secretly. Not long after Lin Sun finished cleaning up the spoils of war, a low and hoarse voice suddenly sounded in the distance. "Ling Xuanzi, you're facing a great calamity. Good luck." Lin Sun's eyes flashed with killing intent, and his divine sense swept towards the direction of the voice, but he found that the place was already empty. "Good luck? I'd like to see who can leave this trial world alive." Lin Sun's heart was boiling with killing intent. The previous encounter made him feel a dangerous undercurrent against him, and he didn't intend to keep a low profile anymore. Whoosh! Not long after, Lin Sun moved through the void and left. A great battle had just occurred here, and it was not advisable to stay for long. An hour later, in the depths of a rolling mountain range, Lin Sun casually set up a restriction, and then released a spirit from the abyssal sword cauldron. This was a spirit that was captured by him in the battle just now, and it belonged to an old man at the 8th level of the Emperor realm. Lin Sun's eyes were deep, and he said bluntly, "Are you going to let me search your soul, or take the initiative to answer some of my questions?" The old man was left with only a spirit, and he had long been desperate. Hearing Lin Sun's words, he said without hesitation, "Go ahead, Taoist brother. I promise to tell you everything I know, and only ask for a quick death. P.S. Well, there will be an extra update tonight. About 10 p.m. Are you surprised? Looking for monthly votes. Strive to enter the top 20. Chapter 2538. After a quarter of an hour. Bang. Lin Sun waved his sleeve and erased the spirit of the old man. The old man had told him what he wanted to know, and he was sure that there was no need for him to hide anything. The whole story was simple. As early as in Starting City, when Xiaoheng had secretly won over some Emperor Realm cultivators, he offered a condition that no Emperor Realm cultivator could refuse. As long as Lin Sun was killed in the trial ground, these strong cultivators would have the opportunity to become his guards and go to the eternal world with him. Even if they did not want to join him, they could get 10 star sources as long as they fought Lin Sun together. 10 star sources, according to the market value, were worth 55 eternal void crystals. More importantly, with this item, he could smoothly leave Beginning City and continue his journey to the eternal true world. This surprised Lin Sun. How could one Xiaoheng be so rich? But soon, Lin Sun understood that the reason why Wen Xiaoheng dared to make the promise was that he had Heng Tianshua's guarantee. Lin Sun understood it all at once. With the guarantee of Heng Tianshua, an ordinary Emperor Realm cultivator, how could they refuse such a tempting offer? This was also why Lin Sun was attacked as soon as he entered the trial ground. Lin Sun finally understood why those people had clamored before. In this trial ground, no matter who met him, they would regard him as prey. Men die for wealth, while birds die for food. This saying may be a little cliché, but it is an unbreakable truth since ancient times. Lin Sun's black eyes flashed. He was not afraid of Wen Xiaoheng's scheme, but he had to consider the threat from Heng Tianshua. "You see me as your enemy, so what if I destroy you?" Lin Sun had already sentenced Heng Tianshua to death in his heart. Next, he began to count the spoils. In the previous battle, he had killed more than 10 Emperor Realm cultivators. Among them, 3 were 9 Realm ancestors, 2 were peerless figures, and the rest were ordinary Emperor Realm cultivators. The spoils of war they had collected were also of all sorts. Among them, there were more than 3 million first-class Eternal Void crystals, 5 underworld pearls, and more than 20 Emperor weapons and ancient treasures. Other divine materials were piled up like mountains. According to Lin Sun's rough estimation, they were worth at least 1 million Eternal Void crystals. Apart from that, there were also some miscellaneous items such as secret manuals, cultivation methods, pills, and so on. Good harvest. Lin Sun showed a satisfied expression. What he lacked the most at this moment was a large amount of wealth. Only in this way would he be able to exchange for even more underworld pearls and completely condense those 9 netherworld Dao markings. Then, Lin Sun took out an ancient bronze umbrella. This was a miraculous ancient treasure that contained strange restraining Dao markings within it. It blotted out the sky and enveloped the surroundings, and it was called the Heaven-Supporting Umbrella. This treasure was originally branded with the willpower of one Dao ancestor, but now it had been destroyed and erased by Lin Sun. The reason why Lin Sun paid attention to this treasure was that the ancient bronze umbrella was filled with wisps of immortal characteristics, which was very unusual. Undoubtedly, it was a heavily damaged Eternal Dao weapon. Even though it was like that, its might was much more formidable and terrifying than most imperial artifacts. But what Lin Sun valued more was the immortal substance in this treasure. Based on his understanding, this undying substance was incredibly valuable and valuable. If it was in the eternal true world, it would be a valuable material that was at the level of an earthly treasure. It could be used to refine an immortal Dao soldier. After playing with the sky umbrella for a while, Lin Sun decided to set off. Buzz Lin Sun's identity plate appeared. With a slight sense, Lin Sun could tell that a wisp of aura surged out from the identity plate and pointed into the distance. According to the rules of the trial, within a month, only by entering the area pointed out by the identity plate could one open the path to the outside world and leave this place. The world of the trial was divided into 9 large areas. This also meant that Lin Sun needed to enter the area pointed out by his identity plate before he could leave this place. However, Lin Sun was still not sure which area he would reach in the end. Swoosh! Lin Sun's figure flickered, and he moved according to the guidance of his identity plate. There are different kinds of dangers distributed in the 9 large areas. The places where stellar sources are buried are usually places where dangers occur frequently. On the way, the cyan sparrow hidden in the sachet guided him. Among them, the most terrifying area is the 9th area. Since ancient times until now, all those who entered that area have died there. Not a single one survived. However, in today's times, the governor's mansion will no longer arrange people to go to the 9th area for those who participate in the trial, because it is no different from courting death. As soon as he heard this, Lin Sun's heart suddenly sank. You mean, which area can the strong who participate in the trial enter is arranged by the governor's mansion? Of course. The cyan sparrow said without thinking. Lin Sun's expression suddenly became uncertain. He had a strong premonition that he had already been schemed by Heng Tianxua. Are you suspecting that? The cyan sparrow obviously guessed something, and her tone suddenly changed. If so, isn't it the end? Lin Sun took a deep breath, restrained the killing intent in his heart, and said, Cyan Sparrow, do you know what dangers are hidden in the 9th area? It is said that it is the core place where the deities of the last era live. But after the changes of the era, the 9th area has become the most strange and ominous place. The cyan sparrow also realized that Lin Sun's situation was very likely to become bad. She didn't dare to hide anything and told everything she knew. However, after listening to it, Lin Sun found that what the cyan sparrow knew was just some rumors. No one knew what kind of dangers existed in the 9th area. Since ancient times, all those who entered the 9th area had died. Even the powerful existences at the immortal realm couldn't survive. This made the killing intent in Lin Sun's heart more turbulent, and his face became gloomy. He had never offended Heng Tianxua at all, but Heng Tianxua made such a cruel and vicious arrangement because of Wen Xiaoheng. Obviously, he didn't intend to let Lin Sun leave alive. The most important thing now is to get Star Source. It is not too late to think about leaving when the trial is approaching. Lin Sun didn't change his direction. As far as he knew, if he wanted to reach the 9th area, he had to pass through the 1st area to the 8th area until he reached the deepest part of the trial, where the 9th area was located. There was enough time for him to search for Star Source along the way. 2 hours later, Lin Sun suddenly stopped, with a surprised look on his face. In front of him, a gray mist appeared. It filled the surroundings and permeated the boundless space and time. Even though his heaven's eye could see through falsehood and see through vanity, it was unable to see through the gray mist that filled the surroundings. However, he could feel that there seemed to be a force thousands of times more powerful than the operation of stars surging in the gray fog. In front of this force, even the ancestor of one Tao was as vulnerable as an ant. In front of this force, even the ancestor of one Tao was as vulnerable as an ant. This is the boundary barrier of the trial, similar to the space crystal wall between the big world and the small world, the cyan sparrow pointed out. So, behind the gray fog is the first zone? Lin Sun was lost in thought. Yes, with the identity certificate in your hand, you can easily pass through this barrier without worrying about being hurt, the cyan sparrow replied. I see. Lin Sun breathed a sigh of relief. The power in the gray fog was so terrible that it was enough to kill a Tao ancestor. If he broke in rashly, he would definitely die. He didn't hesitate any longer, and in the next moment, he'd already stepped into the gray mist and vanished. The first area. The mountains rose and fell, and the earth was crisscrossed with ravines. This was a world that was like a desolate ruin. Whether it was the mountains, rocks, or the earth, everywhere showed a withered and desolate aura of death. The air was filled with a heavy and oppressive murderous aura. As the wind blew, it was like thousands of sharp blades sweeping through, and it cut shocking cracks on the surface of the mountains. What a terrifying murderous aura! After Lin Sun entered the gray fog, he came to this world. The murderous aura that was everywhere raged like countless blades. If an ordinary cultivator came here, he would probably be cut into countless pieces before he could react. This place was very desolate. He didn't even see a single living being along the way for hundreds of miles. All he saw were bare rocks and gravel, and it was completely silent. Gusts of strong wind swept past like raging swords, fierce and ghastly. Even Lin Sun had to run his cultivation to feel much more relaxed. "Are there any characteristics of the place where the stellar source is buried?" he asked. The stellar source was the source energy of the stars, and it contained the profound mysteries of the Great Way. In the countless years of the past, this trial world would frequently devour numerous stars from the universe. After these stars fell into the trial world, they would undergo a wonderful change, and they would transform into stellar source that contained different attributes of laws and were buried in different places. Some stellar source were incomplete, and some were complete, and the attributes they contained were different. Some stellar source with excellent quality could even give birth to unimaginable mysteries of the Great Way. In the eyes of cultivators, the stellar source was not only a treasure to comprehend the Great Way, but also a rare divine material to refine a sovereign weapon. While the sovereign weapon absorbed the stellar source, it could also obtain the mysteries of the Great Way within the stellar source, and it could be said to be marvelous. This was also the reason why the stellar source was so expensive. The green sparrow quickly said, "Life force. As long as there is life force, there will definitely be a stellar source. You have also seen it, this training ground is a land of death where not even a blade of grass grows. As long as there is life force, it will definitely be discovered at the first instant." "So that's how it is." Lin Sun nodded. Suddenly, a huge ferocious bird flew across the sky. Its wings were thousands of meters long, and it stirred up a gust of wind. It flew from the distant sky in an instant. There were 7 or 8 figures on the back of the ferocious bird. Seeing Lin Sun walking alone, they seemed to be very surprised, and their faces showed a strange expression. When they saw Lin Sun's appearance, the faces of these figures suddenly became subtle. Some were greedy, some were surprised, and some were excited. It was as if they had inadvertently encountered a long-cherished prey. P.S. Here's the update. Well, seeing everyone's enthusiasm in voting, maybe there'll be an update tomorrow. Library of Literature. Chapter 2539. The ferocious bird soared into the sky and approached Lin Sun aggressively. Lin Sun immediately stopped and looked over indifferently with a hint of coldness at the corner of his lips. Someone else saw him as prey again? Coincidentally, wasn't this a group of prey to him as well? Lin Sun knew very well that these people clearly didn't know about the bloody incident at the entrance of the trial ground. Otherwise, they wouldn't have dared to approach him so aggressively. "Ha ha ha, Ling Xuanzi, I didn't expect to see you here." On the ferocious bird, a tall and skinny man in a luxurious robe couldn't help but laugh as he stared at Lin Sun fearlessly. The others were tempted. This group of people was extraordinary, and they came from the same camp. The leading man in luxurious robe was a peerless great emperor with a 7th stage cultivation. He even had 2 9th realm martial ancestors with him. Among all the experts participating in the trial, this lineup was already very strong and shouldn't be underestimated. "I'm happy to meet all of you too," Lin Sun revealed a bright smile. This caused everyone to be stunned, and they were slightly surprised. From what they knew, although Ling Xuanzi had assassinated Wen Xiaoheng before, he didn't succeed. Moreover, the reason why he was able to avoid being killed by the city lord's mansion was because of Tan Tai Feng. No one would believe that Ling Xuanzi, who was only a 6th-stage martial emperor, would be so strong. Moreover, they knew that Ling Xuanzi came from a broken place like the Starry Sky ancient path. Even if he had a backer, it was completely negligible. It was because of this judgment that they had enough confidence to face Lin Sun. But now, Lin Sun's calm attitude made them feel a little uneasy. Right at this moment, a deep and magnetic sneer was heard. A bunch of idiots. Ling Xuanzi just killed more than 10 great emperors, including many peerless great emperors and 9th realm martial ancestors. Are you guys courting death by treating him as prey? The voice echoed in the sky like the sonorous voice of the Tao. Far away, a figure appeared out of nowhere. He was handsome and wore a black Taoist robe. His sleeves fluttered, and when he opened and closed his eyes, chaotic qi filled the air. Beneath his feet was a green gourd that was as large as a boat. His extraordinary demeanor was unparalleled. Lin Sun frowned. As for the man in luxurious robes and the others who stood on the ferocious bird, they all revealed shocked expressions, and their hearts trembled. Is this for real? This Ling Xuanzi is so monstrous? Even though they were cursed as idiots, they recognized the origins of that man in Taoist robes, and they were very sure that with his identity, he disdained to lie at all. For a moment they retreated subconsciously, keeping a distance from Lin Sun as if he was a scourge. Are you going to help them? Lin Sun asked, some information about them emerging in his mind. Yuduqiu. Zhu Ying was an 8th-level martial monarch, nicknamed Emperor Zhu Lu. Just like Feng Junlin, he came from the Godly Rise starfield, which was ranked number 1 in the world. His background was extremely extraordinary, and his natural talent was extraordinary. He had cultivated in the profound way for 9,000 years, and his foundation was unfathomable. Yuduqiu was also one of the few people who Lin Sun paid attention to among those who participated in the trial this time. After all, he was a peak 8th-level great emperor. Merely this cultivation was sufficient to make it impossible for anyone to disregard him. Yuduqiu, who was extraordinarily handsome in a Taoist robe, shook his head and smiled. I'm just reminding them, lest they die without knowing how they died. The expression of the man in the luxurious robe and the others on the ferocious bird was rather ugly, but after hearing Yuduqiu's words, they did not dare to take it lightly. Lin Sun glanced at Yuduqiu, then turned around and left. Watching him leave, Yuduqiu seemed to be in deep thought. The man in the luxurious robe finally couldn't help but ask, Brother, is Ling Xuanzi really that terrifying? You don't believe me? Then you can go and try. Remember, I'm only reminding you out of goodwill this time because you're all from the Godly Rise starfield. Next time, you better pray for your own good. After saying that, Yuduqiu stepped on the giant green calabash and teleported away. The man in the luxurious robe and the others looked at each other, and all of them broke out in cold sweat. Just now, they walked on the edge of death. After Lin Sun traveled for another few thousand miles, the smell of blood began to appear on the road. Apart from that, there were also some fragments of magic treasures and traces of an intense battle. Clearly, they had entered a dangerous area. Even Lin Sun became cautious when he arrived here. Not long after, a huge lake appeared in his field of vision. The lake was surging with golden starlight. It was bright and translucent, and it dyed the world golden. The thing that caused one's heart to palpitate was that the golden lake actually emitted an extremely terrifying and sharp aura, and it threw this expanse of the heavens and the earth into chaos and emitted ripping sounds. When they got closer, they felt as if their skin was being cut by a knife, and it was so piercing that they almost couldn't open their eyes. At this moment, there were already many figures standing around the golden lake. All of them were on high alert and ready, as if there was a shocking treasure in the golden lake. It was also here that Lin Sun felt a rush of vitality. This made him realize that there was a stellar source in the lake that was covered in golden starlight. I've been wandering around this area for a long time. Only this place is filled with a sharp aura of gold, and the Tao is born. Based on this, the stellar source buried in the depths of this lake must contain the power of laws related to the Tao of gold. I just don't know what kind of danger is hidden in this lake. Just now, someone barged in and was instantly killed by the terrifying golden wave. That scene was too terrifying. A low voice sounded. Hearing these conversations, Lin Sun knew that someone had already made a move just now, but he lost his life in this golden lake. No wonder, even though there were many Emperor Realm cultivators here, no one dared to make a move. They were obviously waiting for an opportunity. Lin Sun's arrival also attracted the attention of many people. Just like the man in a luxurious robe and his group, they seemed to have found a new prey. Lin Sun ignored them. Among the people scattered around the lake, there was no one worthy of attention. He cast his gaze on the golden lake. In an instant, Lin Sun clearly sensed that the depths of this lake was filled with an extremely strong aura of the Tao of gold. It was so shocking that it was almost materialized. But at the same time, there was some dangerous aura lurking in it, like water ghosts and ghosts. It was covered by the golden starlight and couldn't be seen through. Everyone, Ling Xuanzi has appeared here. Why don't we make a move together and capture him? In this way, why do we need to take the risk to fight for the stellar source in this lake? Suddenly, a cold voice sounded. It came from an old man in a crane cloak and holding a snake-shaped cane. He emitted the aura of an ancestor of the ninth realm. As soon as he said that, many people looked at Lin Sun, eager to make a move. Everyone knew that when Xiaoheng had already promised that as long as they could kill Lin Sun, they would be able to obtain 10 stellar sources and leave Starting City. If they were willing, they could even follow Wen Xiaoheng and head to Eternal True World with him. This was a temptation that many people couldn't refuse. At that moment, Lin Sun's figure flashed and appeared in front of the old man in the crane cloak. The abyssal sword cauldron descended from the sky and rumbled as it attacked. Everyone was stunned. This Ling Xuanzi was too overbearing. He attacked just because he didn't agree with him? The old man in the crane cloak snorted coldly and waved the snake-shaped cane, striking out. The power was great. After all, it was the power of a ninth realm ancestor. Ordinary Emperor Realm cultivators had to avoid this attack. But accompanied by a deafening explosion, the snake-shaped cane was shattered with a crack, and an endless rain of light burst out. The old man's expression changed. He wanted to dodge, but it was too late. He could only take it head-on. Boom! That area seemed as if the heavens and the earth were collapsing, and the destructive energy it emanated swept towards the surroundings. It crushed space and caused explosions that shook the heavens and the earth to rumble. In the midst of the collision, the old man in the crane cloak was completely suppressed by the abyssal sword cauldron. His skin and bones exploded inch by inch, and he let out a shrill scream. In the end, he was crushed, and his body and soul were destroyed. The bloody and domineering scene shocked the Emperor Realm cultivators near the Golden Lake, and their souls almost left their bodies. Who would have thought that a ninth realm ancestor with monstrous power would be killed in the blink of an eye? Was this something a peak 6th level emperor could do? At that moment, the greed and killing intent in everyone's heart disappeared, and it was replaced by endless coldness. The way they looked at Lin Sun changed completely. Who else wants to try? Lin Sun's eyes were like lightning as he glanced at everyone. No one dared to look him in the eye. The terrifying murderous power had deeply shocked these Emperor Realm cultivators. If you don't want to die, leave now, Lin Sun said coldly. In one sentence, he ordered them to leave. He wanted to occupy the Golden Lake. Many people looked at each other, but in the end, no one dared to resist. They suppressed the unwillingness in their hearts, turned around and left. Brother, this star source has been targeted by us for a long time, but you want to occupy this place alone. Aren't you looking down on us too much? Someone said angrily. Boom. Lin Sun stretched out his hand and grabbed. A huge hand that covered the sky swept across the sky, and with unparalleled terrifying power, it grabbed the person fiercely. Not to mention resisting, he didn't even have the strength to struggle. It was like an eagle catching a chick. In fact, this person was just an ordinary 7th-level Emperor Realm cultivator. In Lin Sun's eyes, this person was nothing. Go, enter the lake and test its depth. If you can survive, consider yourself lucky. If you're harmed, you can only blame your bad luck, Lin Sun said indifferently. The people who had not left were horrified when they saw this. You! How dare you treat me like this? My senior brother will definitely kill you. That person was startled and angered. He cried out repeatedly, feeling terrified. He had never expected that just a few words of discontent from his mouth would provoke a fatal calamity. Lin Sun didn't care at all. Such a threat was useless to him. He swung his hand. Whoosh! The person was directly thrown into the golden lake. This person was also good. After falling into the lake, he immediately chose to rush out. However, as soon as his figure reached the sky above the lake, a huge golden whirlpool rushed up and directly pulled him back into the lake. He disappeared in an instant. After seeing this sudden scene, people around the lake couldn't help but gasp and their faces changed greatly. Even Lin Sun narrowed his eyes slightly.